that goes with anything that's outside the norm, like an art form. I know when I started, you know, my dad especially, he's such a hard worker, and all he knew was hard work his whole life. So to tell someone like that I'm going to photo school and I'm going to pay all this money for a photo, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
You know, but his love was in, well, he was a hard worker on the road, but then when he would come home, he had his motorcycles.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that connected us. And then, I mean, it kind of happened fast. I was telling you this earlier that my first shoot was like on a Discovery Channel set.
Yeah.
And he knew those builders, so and actually really liked them as builders. So when that happened, it was like, okay, well, maybe this does make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know for a long time, traveling around the way I did, I know my family probably was like, what are you doing out there?
Yeah.
What's the end goal? I don't think there was a goal or a plan. It was just to do something I was passionate about, and it just fell into place somehow. Timing was right for me in every aspect.
Yeah. What made you decide to go to school for photography in the first place? Like, what was that push in that direction?
I went to a really small town high school, so I was always into arts and being creative, but I didn't know what direction I wanted to go, and my high school didn't really offer much. It was like a drawing class, a painting class, and kind of a sculpture class, 3D art. So then I went to a community college, and the art program there was actually pretty great. There was some great teachers that maybe weren't like traditional in the sense of like, this is the way, these are the rules of how you're supposed to do this. They were more, well, what if you thought about doing it this way? I had a great
The way
teacher.
they delivered it to you was much more...
Yeah, it was like, why don't you experiment a little rather than, no, this is the way you're supposed to set this up, or this is the technical way of doing it. I had a teacher, Michael Bennett. He would, it was always, you'd think you would hit it on the head, but he'd have a good way of like, well, and he'd throw this like oddball idea out there. You'd be like, yeah, actually, maybe I'll try that. And it would send you down this whole other path. And there wasn't any real rules to it. You were just kind of exploring. And then finally, my mom bought a Rebel 2000 film camera. And photography was always something that I was interested in, but never really had the money to like afford a camera. And she was like, well, if you want to take a class, I'll let you borrow my camera or use the camera, or it's both of our camera.
Yeah.
So I signed up for a class. And right about at that time, I was learning to ride a motorcycle as well. My dad had started letting me ride one of his bikes, which was a 69 FLH stock original paint bike.
Nice.
So I would be riding that to school, and it was this little town called Malta, Illinois. And the college was literally kind of on a little hill. I mean, there's no hills in Illinois, but cornfields as far as you could see.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 25 miles from where I lived to school, but it was all cornfields. So I would ride my dad's 69 to class, and rather than throw the camera in the saddlebag, I'd have it around my neck. So on the way to class, I would take a photo of the gas tank and the speedometer, and then I would shoot down the road, and you'd have the front wheel or the handlebars, and then we'd be in the darkroom developing that stuff. And it just kind of was a thing that there were two things that were happening at one time that I was really passionate about, and it was the motorcycles and then the photography. I didn't know that was the route I was going to take. I actually was doing jewelry. This was something like one of the first rings that I made. So that was cast, and I made, if you look into it, I made that stone.
Yeah.
It's like out of sculpion resin. So that was my focus, was 3-dimensional, working with silver and steel. And then I got into a darkroom class and I started developing those photos and watching them appear in what then was in the darkroom. It was an autopsy table. So you'd be at an autopsy table with just like red light. And I was so into it that most of the time I'd be the only one in there because I was like wanting to use that time to be in the labs. So I'd be in there developing photos. So those two things were happening at the same time.
It's got like an H.R. Geiger kind of vibe.
Yeah.
In my.
Yeah, I was into, I don't know, I was into weird shit when still am, but is this mic all right? I keep feeling like my neck hit it.
I mean, I don't know. It could be all fucked up. If you want to just clip it on your shirt just to be safe, it'll be fine. Especially, you won't see it on that angle over there. But no, that's, man, like.
I guess if it just hangs, huh?
Yeah, it'll be fine. So my son's mom, in 2004, we got together, and then in 2006, she started going to college in this kind of like Arlington. It's like in between Dallas and Fort Worth, and she was huge into art history, which that's kind of the joke now. Is like, oh, it's an art history major. Yeah. And so as a second or a minor, she took photography, and this was 2006, 5, 6. You're kind of, there's still dark rooms in classrooms. There's still a lot of that, but it is moving to digital somewhat. And I was just kind of like, I was working in a body shop, and then I'd come home and she has all these photography books. Look at these prints I made today. I'm like, that's fucking rad. Like just seeing them. And then she would shoot like random stuff. I'd go on her with her little projects. Like, you got to go shoot doors. To this day, I will go and do certain things like that just to take myself out of like what I see every day. Yeah. And I was just enthralled with it. But at the time, I felt like because I was trying to be an airbrush artist and a custom painter, that I couldn't more or less cheat on my agreement with the universe that I want to get to this place, right? So I just kind of like would enjoy it, and then I would always make friends with all the photographers that would shoot the bikes that we would build. And yeah, it's funny how having a passion like riding motorcycles and then falling in love with photography, or either way, it's like they go hand in hand together so well, because they are both unique to the space of like, you don't see a motorcycle every day. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like when I'm driving through LA last week, 2 weeks ago, 1 out of every 5 cars was a Tesla. I see those everywhere now. Yeah. I still don't see a motorcycle that much, right? Yeah. So they stand out more. They look more unique. And taking a picture of that, it just fucking made sense to me back then.
But that's the beauty of photography. Anything that you're passionate about, that camera allows you to submerge your life into that. Yeah. If you're really passionate about it, it's kind of like a VIP pass in some way to like get into the things that you love. That's weird. I just said that out loud, but I never thought of it that way. Yeah. But like, it is a way to really submerge yourself into things you love.
Paint was like that for me though. It's the same thing. Because I was a painter, I could get to the center of this type of scene that would work in. I'm automotive, right? Yeah. Oh, the race car scene or the bike scene, and it's like a sure way in, just like I would say a photography could be as well. Yeah. Back then, more photography than in now, but
And in the era that I was coming up in, it was pretty much like magazines were the way of like seeing the world. You didn't have the internet wasn't a thing yet. And in fact, when I started shooting with a film camera, I'd never used a computer before. Computers were never a thing that I was into growing up. So when I went through all my general education classes to get those out of the way because it was a cheaper way to do it. Then I decided I was going to go to Columbia College in Chicago, more expensive school. But as soon as I landed there, they're like, all right, it's time to take a digital photography class. I'm like, what? I don't want, that's not me. I don't want to take that. And they forced me to take it, but I also had to take computer classes because I didn't know the first thing about turning a computer on.
Yeah.
Or how to type. And to this day, I'm still like trying to figure out how to type. In fact, I always remember the teacher there. She had an accent. She'd always say she was saying toolbar, but she'd say tuber. Find the tuber. And that sticks in my head to this day. Anyway, I was lost. But then when I started, you'd have to scan your film in because digital hadn't really caught up in a way where you could shoot with a digital camera that was affordable.
Yeah.
And shot something that was usable until I think it was like, I remember the Rebel 2000 coming out, and that was kind of that first means of getting into digital photography and an SLR. But you'd have to scan your film in, and then with that came all the dust that was on that little negative, and then you'd be in there, cloning out all the little dust. But then I started messing around with, you could bring the sky down a little, or you could remove this trash that's in the road. That's one thing that just, when I'm photographing, it's always like freedom of the world. I don't want signs of human nature in a lot of my shots, unless it's, of course, in a city but I just don't like trash laying everywhere. So that was an easy way to I can just edit that plastic bag out of the photo.
Yeah.
And I started to fall in love with that, and I would spend hours sitting there just editing one photo. And then when I started shooting for magazines, I was still in that film era. So again, timing was I came in a time when there were like 3 photographers that I knew of. It was like Lichter and a few other folks that were shooting, but they were shooting to slide film. So they would shoot, that would go to the magazine. So it just kind of there just wasn't photographers around. And then I came in right at that digital era where I hopped in. I was shooting digital, and everyone was kind of converting to that, but you still didn't have content creators. You didn't have videographers. You didn't have photographers running everywhere. So I just kind of got in at the beginning stages of all that. But I came from a more commercial-minded photography background, because when I went to school, I was pushed into once I got to the Columbia College, all right, we're going to take all your creativity and throw it out the window. I'm like, wow, I didn't know what to think about that.
Yeah.
For me, I just wanted to experiment and explore and see what I could come up with on my own. But they made you throw that out the window, and then you focused in on the techniques of, this is how you take a technically perfect photograph. This is how you develop a perfect photograph. So pushing and pulling film, where you would overexpose or underexpose, and then develop it a certain way to bring out the shadows or the highlights, just depending on what you wanted to show. And then in the darkroom to make the perfect print where you had all your tonal range. And then that went into color. And then that, good thing for me, I had all that education to then put it into what a digital photograph could be.
Okay, yeah.
So that era of motorcycle photography, I just remember, and I don't think I would ever do this now, or I'd think about myself doing this in this time frame, but I had met a woman actually here in Milwaukee. It was before I lived in Milwaukee. She was also doing some photography. Her name was Colleen Schwartz. And she's like, hey, I want to take you to this trade show. It's the V-Twin Expo in Cincinnati. And I had made this little book. It was about this big. And it had about, 30 photos in it that I had taken. And I printed them out, and I put it in a spiral bound thing, and I put it in my pocket. And I showed it to a few people. And then by the end of it, everyone was buzzing about it. And I just can't imagine.
What year was this?
This was probably 2004 or 5.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, 2004 or 5. And even met Michael Lichter there, because he had heard about, oh, you're the kid with the book, or that little flip book.
Yeah.
And then I'd met a guy in St. Louis, Rich Phillips, he does leather work.
Yeah.
And is an amazing fabricator. He does it all. And he wanted me to shoot his bike because it was going to go into ironworks or something. He needed somebody to photograph it. So I went down there, became good friends with him, and then he was going to the El Diablo run. It's like, hey, I got this extra bike. I'll take you. Just hop on it. Let's go. So then I started meeting people, and then the bikes that I were into weren't really a cool thing at that time either. So it just kind of like came in at the beginning stages of all these things. And
how do you refer to that genre, scene, or era of motorcycling? Because I think we've coined it like the vintage choppers. Traditionals, probably
choppers,
okay.
Or, I mean, for a long time they say period correct choppers. Because you'd have, I don't know, I was always really into like Horse magazine. My dad always had that magazine, and that was the first magazine I shot for. And then Dice magazine came out, and when Dice magazine came out, like, oh, this is like the traditional clean version of what's in the Horse. The Horse was like more of your backwoods kind of like, the really cool bikes, but less refined. And not so specific on parts. It had a look. It looked like a traditional chopper, but it probably had disc brakes or it had some modern things. But
would you say the Horse was more the culture instead of like a real just all about the motor, the bike, the things like
it was a whole
a cultural magazine almost, because that's what if you think about it, Easy Rider was kind of more of a cultural.
And that's what they always show photos from shows and the wild things that were going on at the shows and the women and that whole interaction. And then Dice was more of the cleaned up version of it, but younger as well. It's traditional period correct. So you'd only use parts that were from that period. I guess whatever period you were trying to create, whether you were in the 70s with a long chopper or the late 60s, with shorter or high handlebar bikes or whatever it was.
Well, so if you're into that style of bike, like how do y'all start to come together in even the simplest terms of like, I kind of know some of the backstory of the whole blog era, but that was a byproduct of y'all already coming together and having these factions in these different cities, right? Or would you say?
I think how it started was with magazines. You'd have guys that are just sitting on their toilet or sitting in their, in their house, and they're like, wow, and younger people coming up, and they found this style, and in the beginning, I remember seeing bikes and the people that I met, they were like kind of close. They were more like a Horse style bike, I guess, where they were like a mixed match of stuff. It was like almost to that period correct state, but they weren't quite there yet. And then, like, I guess for me, the way it all worked was I was into that style of bike looking at David Mann paintings. Like, looking at those just blew my mind. And it's like, I'm always drawn to an earlier era. And there seemed to be something that was magic about the people that were in those David Mann paintings. The way the lines of the bikes, it seemed more classy to me.
I can see that.
And that's what I was drawn to. And so that's the vision I had in my head of what I wanted to create. And I didn't know the history really I just knew those. I don't even know where I originally saw them. They're probably in some bathroom of like some, garage station bathroom or auto, I can't even, it's not like I was in like motorcycle shops or anything, but those images somehow found their way into my brain. I was seeing them from somewhere. And especially when my dad started bringing probably was in those magazines. So that's what I saw being a motorcyclist or being a biker should look like or be. It wasn't like, dirty biker, but like had some style and class. So
that's a good way to put that. If you like, I've got the horse. I'm a magazine buff as well, and I'm just thinking back in 2004, like if you're a part of like mainstream motorcycles, like that doesn't look nothing like realistically what David Mann paintings and all that stuff was depicting, right?
Yeah.
And so, and the crowd was generally a little bit older in a sense that like, you probably wouldn't be able to afford to get into some of the things that these guys are going to do with their bikes, right?
Yeah. No.
And I could see that like almost being drawn to a idea or your perception of what something must have been like and starting to try to recreate that. And I think,
well, also like you kind of hit it on the head there, like being young and coming out of school, didn't have a lot of money ever in my life. So it went from, there was the time of panheads and shovel heads. Then it moved into big inch motors and fat tires. And so there was an era, the mid 90s, where knuckleheads and panheads and that was all old garbage.
Yeah.
There were still the old timers that knew about them and held them as the jewel, but you could get that stuff cheap. So for me, I ended up with an iron head, last thing I wanted, but it still was like an old bike that fit that era. And I could get into it. It was cheap enough to get into. And I guess I also grew up riding my dad's older bikes, that 69 specifically. Still had the pogo seat. And I just liked an earlier era. It wasn't really from the beginning when I was getting into it, before I knew anything about choppers. I just knew I liked, like I had my first vehicle was a 1970 Bronco, then it was a 63 Galaxy in school. So I just liked that earlier time period. So I liked riding around that old bike, and then started to get into custom stuff, which was choppers, and I liked that earlier era. So then I didn't know anybody. I was blessed to have my dad introduce me and then allow me to ride trust me to ride his motorcycles. And he basically would let me go anywhere I wanted to go on that bike. But I always respected it. And also I didn't build it. I would work on it with him. It was always a solid bike. But the idea of riding it to somewhere, even a couple states away or the next state over, was scary to me because what if it breaks down? I just didn't have that knowledge yet. So, and also it wasn't my bike. So if something did happen, I didn't want to just start tweaking on it. It wasn't mine. So it wasn't until I got my own pile of parts where it started as a pile of parts, and I touched every bit of that bike. And then in the end, you've got something that you're like, oh, well, if that's broke, I know exactly how to fix it on the side of the road.
Sometimes you'll even know it's breaking while you're rolling. Yep, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. And then the more you ride with old bikes, especially with bikes that you've built, and then mainly with bikes that other people have built, you see the common thread of your sissy bar broke right there. Well, the next one, it broke right there. And it's okay, you see a common thread.
Yeah.
And then you become the asshole. It's well, you should probably gusset that, or you should probably build that a little differently. And whatever. and they don't want to hear it, and then they get it chromed, and then you're on the side of the road because the sissy bar broke, and they got this nice chrome sissy bar that's broke right where you told them it's gonna break. You just get good at like seeing the issues,
figuring it out.
Yeah, and then it's people will go to the most extreme thing, like no, just let's just take a breath. Let's start with the simplest thing, and over time you just get to know like, oh, that's a symptom of this, that's a symptom of that.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier, how like I do want to get into having some of these style of motors, but like I want to know, I don't want to rely on somebody else.
Yeah.
Every time, I know that eventually you're going to have to ride one, build one, ride one, and then go through the motions on your own. But if you take your time, you can kind of learn it more. And like I'm at the phase of learning carburetors pretty efficiently, So that's the fuel side of it. Then I'll get to the magneto and the fucking...
Yeah. I mean, these motors are, flathead all the way up. Even up to twin cam. Like,
yeah.
They're all basically the same design.
Yeah.
They just add a few more or take something away or add more over the years, or change materials. And they just kind of got a little bigger.
Yeah.
But there's the same basic design. But going back to like how that whole connection started with the folks that were getting into that period correct thing in the beginning. I remember I was going to a show in Chicago, and I didn't know anyone that rode a bike that I liked. I'd never even seen one, I don't think, in real life. I just had this idea through magazines. And it was a black guy backing a panhead up to the curb in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I just like stopped dead in my tracks. I was like, I'd never seen anything like that. And again, like I wasn't the type of person to ever approach a random person, but I just was like, hey, cool bike, man. And he's like, yeah, whatever, and then it got to talking a little bit. And I think maybe I had already shot the Billy Lane, Russell Mitchell thing. Mm-hmm. And then they, of course, they liked that and they wanted me to shoot more, but I just needed to find bikes to shoot. So I was like, hey, I'd love to photograph your bike. And he's like, oh. So we started talking, and then he was going to see his friends they had this like basement spot in the Flatiron building in like Wicker Park, Chicago. Mm-hmm. And back then it was a whole, like now it's the place to be. Back then it was a lot rougher. We go down there, there's a pool table down there, and they're pretty gnarly guys. I was just this young dude. But then he started introducing me to this friend and that friend, and we're kind of on the same page, but they weren't traditional style choppers just yet. And then Warren that does Mama Tried.
Yeah.
He was like right in there, probably the third person I met that rode a bike that I'm into, So we all got together really quick and then started, like I was still riding my dad's bike at the time. And then they went in they got enough people that we knew around the city to make this community space to all work on bikes. Mm-hmm. So we were all hanging out a lot. And then I was just showing up with the camera, photographing. And then my one friend, Brian Harlow, and then Mitch Cody, who is an amazing artist, doing a lot of motorcycle related art. Mm-hmm. They started a blog, and they lived together, and they called it The Lodge. Mm-hmm. So they started the blog, and Mitch would post his art, and Brian would just write these rambling written posts. He had a pretty great imagination and a way with words. And then I was like the photographic side of it, so I was brought into that. And so it started as I think a friend had painted, it was like on a palette of this Indian face. So it was Kimosabi in the Lodge, they had coined it. So then we had all just started posting on there. And then a few other folks had blogs. Max had his blog, Jeff, Church of Choppers, Zach.
Yeah.
But I think even before that, we met we met Zach and Pole Green and Joe and Watermelon Pete. We met them all up at the SNS 50th anniversary. And it was like that golden era of like, we were all into that style of bike, but didn't really know anybody else. And we rode to this event. And then there was another group of young people that were into the same thing we were into. But Pole Green was like this like savant nerd in the best way, talented dude that already had his finger on the pulse. Like he had like every Easy Rider, and he would just scour every swap meet, and he already had all the coolest parts, and he was building the coolest bikes. Like the first bike that I remember Zach riding was a shovel head with it was a swing arm, but it had high pipes that came up in little Z bars, and I think Pole Green kind of like brought all of those dysfunctional dudes together because they all kind of came out of that rehab facility in Minneapolis, and so that was a good way for them to stay clean and be together, you know, and support each other. And they just were building these wild choppers up there. So then I hadn't even built my bike yet. And then was hanging out with Pole Green, shot his bike. It was a really beautiful panhead. And he had won like the best of show. I think he won a SNS motor at that show. And so I went up to photograph it, and the bars that are on my bike were hanging in the rafters of his garage. And I'm like, man, I'm building this bike, but it's like this front end I have is so skinny. I don't even know what kind of bars I would run on it. Cause like, if they're too wide, it would look goofy. He's like, I got these rabbit ear bars, and he like threw them at me. And then those went on the bike. Warren at a swap meet had this like skirted fender. And I'm like, oh, what are you gonna do with that fender? He's like, you can have it. I think he had like $5 on it, but he just like tossed it at me, you know? So like parts of my bike were those early stages, early friends. And they're still on my bike today. But yeah, and then it just built like, you know, the St. Paul guys had a blog, and we had a blog, and then there was the White Knights in Brooklyn, which was Wes, and those folks over there, and then Grant and Mike. So there was like, and then Cycle Zombies. So then we all kind of had our own things going on, but it was like Born Free that kind of like, Born Free was, I think, as big as it was from the beginning because of the blogs and everyone that was into that niche little thing, which there weren't very many, but the people that were into it knew everyone that was into it. And we all showed up in one spot.
That's cool. I didn't even think about that. Like Born Free being kind of like that. All right, guys, we've all been kind of on the internet together. Let's bring something together.
Let's meet in person.
Yeah, let's do a meet and greet. Right? So no,
and it was in a tiny parking lot. And I went out there with Zach and Pole Green and then Brian from Chicago. And I think Watermelon Pete met us out there. And then I remember riding in with Matt Davis from Dice. It was just a really small community then. And also, I mean, this isn't widely said thing, but it was Born Free kind of started as a beef between the cycle. Maybe this isn't for public air, but whatever. It's long history. It's all squashed now. But like, there was a beef between the Cycle Zombies and Grant and Mike. Cycle Zombies were having a party, and Grant and Mike were like, well, we're gonna have our own party, and it was on the same weekend. So, you know, and they just kind of had the power of I don't know how all that worked, but they set it up, and it was like everyone kind of was ready to go there. And it's just interesting how that era, there was some beefs, or there was some like, you know, gossip or drama here and there, but that's kind of what made it what it was and made it special.
It's kind of like it's timing, right? Like the timing of all the blogs coming together. Because I remember the blog era, it felt like because every genre of everything had a blog. There was someone trying to start a blog. The whole website, build your own website thing was built off the idea that you can create your own blog, right? And I just like, fuck, reading? I gave that shit up in high school. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. Like, I'm out here working in the shop. And then so I missed being a part of that when it was taking place, right?
It wasn't, like, I'm not a reader either.
Yeah.
It's hard for me just to sit down long enough to pay attention because I just want to be moving. But it was everything. It was photographs. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was I just posted an early video that we did. And it's funny because it was something so simple, but so many people chimed in as like, as soon as I heard that come on, it was instantly brought me back to that era. So, and again, like there wasn't people creating video content, so they call it now, content. There wasn't people creating these videos. There were very few people creating good photography that people wanted to look at. Mm-hmm. So those blogs were an outlet for that, where you could just scroll. Like a lot of times there wasn't much about reading anything. It was like, oh, these are photos from the event. So like Born Free, post my photos from that event. And you could click through
but
the photos.
People at the time were looking at everything on a computer more or less, right? Wasn't it like, it wasn't so much like sitting there and scrolling on your phone.
Well, you couldn't. Yeah, there was no phone to scroll through.
So you would be able to see the images, the video, or those scanned in images of the old magazines on a different scale. And I think that's what we lack nowadays is if you only consume all this stuff on a 6-inch screen, like you're not getting the impact of what that photo looks like in real life. Like seeing that right behind the camera here is like, like on my phone, I'm not going to feel there. I'm not going to be able to use that and interpret my own like experience which was what David Mann paintings were. Yeah. Right. They were these depictions of like what you experience. And I would get guys, being a modern motorcycle guy, when some guys would come in the shop, they would be like, oh, I just don't understand those little bikes. I'm like, yeah, but you understand this experience right here, right? Like you've done that. You've been packing your bike and your old lady's out there like not wanting you to leave, but trying to be supportive. Like, that feeling, right? Like that's what he captured at the time when that's what life looked like. And you got to have the imagination to put yourself in that position and maybe replace it with a, jacked up to the nines performance bagger, but it's the same vibe. It's the same concept. It's just time,
It's funny to look at the Dave Mann paintings, like the scenario. What was that? Was that an
like
eagle?
A bird. I don't know, it's like a seagull or something.
All those scenarios are like, unless you've been out on the road, you don't really have a connection to it. I guess when you're looking at the painting, you're like putting it together.
It's too literal.
Yeah. But like you'll see the painting and you're like, oh man, there was that time in Colorado where my chain broke, and then I was like having to walk back down the road to like fetch the chain and then find a chain link. Those like every one of like any scenario you can think of, Dave Mann had painted it and did it in such a way that it was like, you look back at it or you're looking at it, and you're like, it kind of glorifies the moment. Yeah. And also just knowing from the past, like when you're in those moments, they may be horrible moments when you're trying to deal with them and go through them, but those are the ones you always remember. Yeah. And also that's when you meet people, because somebody will stop and they'll offer help. Then you're back at you're camping in their backyard, or they're cooking you a steak that night, or they used to
play in this band called Saviors, and it's fucking wild. You have these amazing stories that happen from it.
Exactly. You just never know the people you're gonna meet, and sometimes you're frustrated and you're like, oh God, no, I don't need any help. Because people will stop and you're like, no, just leave me alone. But then you kind of brush them off. But then then you come to find out like, oh, this is a really important person in the history of motorcycling. There's been a lot of that in my life too. Yeah. And talking about like those early Dave Mann paintings, and then full circle to then becoming friends with Tom. Yeah. And then hearing his stories, and then being in the El Forastero clubhouse and seeing all those photos of the paintings that the photos are the photos that the paintings are based off of.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute. I know I've seen this before, but no one's ever seen it before because it's under a clear coat that's this thick under a table.
Yeah.
Like it only exists there. But you like know the scenario in your head and you're like, oh, that's the Dave Mann painting. But this is the real life photo of that scenario. And it was really cool because again, I didn't even know who Tom Fugle was when I built my bike.
Yeah.
I just knew of that style. And then being in Sioux City and sitting out in front of a bar, and Jerry was just like, he kept walking around my bike, just looking at it. He's like, man, I can see the Tom Fugle influence here. You know, I'm like, man, I'm flattered. But at the time I didn't know, but I saw the Dave Mann paintings, which were Tom.
Yeah.
You know, he was, and to think about the history of like how much he influenced the chopper scene and what that evolved into today. Even your bike that you're on now, like the bike his Evo, I see a lot of similarity your bike to that.
Yes, that Midwest, almost D-rake look. But it's funny because it's kind of depicted in the film, the 21 Days deal. But it's strange as I'm, listening to you talk about this period correct thing, and then knowing that Tom Fugle took a step outside of the limelight for so many years, but then to come and resurface more so on the fact that like you guys found this shit and started kind of putting it out there, and You're Born Freeze, because he didn't come back around till like 12, 10, what was it?
Well, I mean, he was always there.
He was always there,
and
yeah. But
Jeff Wright, and it was the blogs. Jeff Wright was the one, because he's in Des Moines and owns the bars there and grew up.
Had tacos there 2 days ago.
Did you?
Yeah, he won't fucking come meet me though, the asshole.
Worst tacos ever. Best at 2 a.m. Man, I just remember being in the parking lot. Like the next day, there's just puddles of like orange puke everywhere. It's just the taco, like the taco and the sauce they put on it just turns into this orange pile.
Yeah.
Anyway, which is another Tom Fugle story.
Yeah.
And is where I met him, and it was in 2010. But Tom came around kind of like the resurgence of Tom, I would say, is more Jeff Wright. Okay. Because Jeff was friends with him and grew up next to a El Forastero clubhouse. Jeff started posting Tom's photos on his blog. And that was the era of like, you never saw that stuff. Like that stuff didn't exist but in a shoebox somewhere. Yeah. So when the blog came around, Jeff was then, taking photos of them and then reposting them. So people were now aware of these more intimate photos of that time period. Like you saw the stuff in the magazine, and some people would repost that stuff. But when you started seeing those photos from Tom, it was like, whoa. Yeah. And that was, 2006 and 7, 8, somewhere in there. So I was probably seeing that stuff too, but not really relating it to Tom. And then in 2010, we rode from Chicago to Des Moines for a dice party. And that's where I met Tom. And I was on my pan shovel then. I just got my pan shovel together. And I remember it was like, we had gotten there, the sun had set. I was already in deep. I had already drank a few tall glasses of whiskey. And somebody was like, hey, is that your bike out there? It's got your tire's flat. I'm like, ah, shit. I'm like, I'll deal with that in the morning. And I wake up the next morning, and we're all we would always sleep on the side patio on the picnic tables. And Tom was either sleeping back there or slept somewhere in I don't know where, but he came in the morning. He lost his camera. He couldn't find his camera. And one of our friends, Johnny Ratchet, was sleeping on the picnic table, but using his camera bag as a pillow. And he comes in, and there's piles of that orange puke everywhere. Jeremiah had too many and was like basically walking and puking. So we're all sleeping in there. Tom comes in, he's looking for his camera. And he's like, oh, there it is. And he grabs a piece of pizza and slides it under his head and takes his camera bag. And he's like, ah, ha, ha. He's laughing. And, he's just like, he loved seeing us there because he said it reminded him of the early days.
Yeah.
And we were just a bunch of friends that were into building creative choppers, and that's what he always lived by. The choppers were his art form. So he loved us. And then of course I had to change my front tire, or my inner tube, and Jeremiah had puked all over it. So then I had like a 5-gallon bucket of water washing off the front tire of the tacos.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so 2010 is when I met Tom there at that show. I remember him showing me his headlight. He had somehow printed he had said that at that time Harley or somebody had said that you couldn't build a rubber mounted chopper. And he's like, well, I'm going to prove him wrong. So he built that chopper. It was a rubber mounted chopper, rigid chopper. And it had a lion in the lens, the inside of the lens of the headlight. And it was a sealed beam. And he said something like, yeah, they said I couldn't do it, but I said they were lying or something. So he had a lion in there. And I think it's 1%.
What I've known about him through stories is just how he would see something but want to create it himself, or see something somewhere else and bring, like he was just so, but he wanted to do it himself. Like he wanted to make the thing. Like he didn't want to take the metal flake from House of Color that was there. He wanted to go make his own metal flake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I find to be like definitely a call to the generation that he is from.
Yeah.
It's like more about like owning every aspect and not relying on somebody than just using the Amazon next day delivery thing that we live with today.
And that's kind of the way I've always approached it. If I could do it, and I want to touch everything. I don't want to buy something and just put it on my bike. Mm-hmm. If I do buy something, I'm gonna manipulate it or customize it or make it my own. Because that's the whole idea of a chopper, is like you don't want to roll down the street and see someone that has the same thing that you have. In the era of coming up in that time frame, and we had talked about this earlier, is there weren't aftermarket companies just popping off this stuff. So you had to find a shitty Sportster tank that had a big dent in the side of it, and then you'd buy that tank, and then you'd cut it in half and narrow it, pound the dents out. And going back to the David Mann painting, I was going to bring this up earlier. One of my favorite paintings, and it's a scenario-based painting, is the dude, he's like got his frame, and he's got a gas tank, and he's setting it up, and he's like trying to step back to look at the lines of what he's got, and the tank is falling off, and it's like, oh, and he's like running out trying to catch the tank as it's falling. I don't know, like my bike, if you look at it, I've crashed that bike at 75 miles an hour a few different times. I don't even know how many different times. Like you wouldn't ever tell that it's ever been crashed. Well, for one, it's bare steel. I just rub it out. If it were painted, I can't even imagine what it would look like. I was thinking of that the other day. But the only dents in that tank are from when I was setting it, when I was building it. I'd set it up on the backbone, and I'd step back, and I'd have like masking tape or something to hold it up there. And it would like start to fall, like, and you'd catch it. And I would catch it like 20 times, and then on the 21st time it'd fall and it'd hit the ground. So I have a dent on either side of that tank, and that was from when I was building it. Yeah. It was never from all these years, 15 years of riding it. But I always laughed. Somebody posted a photo where they had their bike mocked up, and they had it up on a 2x4, and they were taking a video of it, and it falls over, and you see like the tank wasn't even really mounted to it. It hits the ground, everything just like falls apart. It's just classic. It's in a Dave Mann painting.
Yeah.
Because it's happened when you're building a bike. That's what you do. You set it up. You spend more time looking at it than you do building it.
The lines are an important thing for me, and the lines come to me from painting, especially painting baggers. Is that the same way you would build a chopper and you make sure everything kind of flows in the right way? That's the way I do lines in graphics on a bagger. You have so much surface, right? So you want to make sure the lines kind of flow with you, the rider, the bike, and the vibe you're trying to create. And so when I did that bike, I mean, dude, every day that I got more progress, it had a photo shoot afterwards on there. Okay, let me see what it looks like with the tank on it too. Yeah. And I remember that painting because I'd always put like at least 2 screws in that shit. And every time it would get closer and closer, it was like, yes, yes, yes. And then, man, like I haven't found the way to articulate like that feeling of creating something like that ever before. I've had the very fortunate opportunity to build a lot of really cool bikes, a lot of modern stuff, and they all fucking look sick as hell when I'm done. I'm so stoked about them. But that, where you don't really have, I mean, you have like these old callbacks to certain types of bikes that you're kind of inspired by, but then you're like, okay, but to make it mine, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want the exhaust to look like this. And it opens up so much fucking freedom to like create something and not be trapped inside of a box of it has to be, that I loved about it,
Yeah.
I'm not as connected to the period correct aspect of it, not to throw shade at it in any kind of way, but like, I love the bike and I'm like, well, I fucking love that look, but I just don't know if I could do drum brakes. You know what I'm saying? So there's a thing like Jeff Wright's bikes that I kind of dig, you know what I mean? Or Bill Dodge's or something like that, you know what I mean? So, but that's just rad to see, like, as y'all start doing these blogs, it starts opening up this thing. And I thought that story arc, if you will, in the show was the first time I heard of him, you know what I mean? And then, of course, in 16, he's already kind of been around a lot. You had already shot some of the images that you had shot of him. And then I remember when the Street Chopper came out with that image I think you shot. I have that actual magazine I bought at the store. And I was like, cool, choppers, no idea. I'm like, I like choppers. I'm going to get a magazine. And it happened to be that one that I bought that had that fucking purple sky in the background. Yeah. It was so sick. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was something else.
What was as you guys were building all this, like, you're kind of getting your bikes, you're dialing them in more, upgrading or whatever you would say to that. Born Free's growing, Mama Tries kicking off in 14, right? 14?
Yeah.
But there was already something else going on here that I think Scott used to do, right?
Scott was doing
rockers, something.
The rocker box.
Rocker box, that's right.
Yeah, and that I think was more British focused. I can't say because honestly, I'd never been to one.
Yeah.
And then I think it just got so rowdy. It started right where we went today.
Oh,
that's where it
started. Little spot.
Yeah. And I think they just kind of took over the neighborhood, so they moved him out of the city. He got tired of like dealing with the city, I think. So it moved out to the Road America.
Oh, okay.
During one of the
track,
races. Yeah.
So when, obviously, so did Dice play a pretty big role as being like maybe the magazine voice of these like scenes? You know what I'm saying? These different scenes in America?
Yeah. Well, Dice was just that one. Like it's evolved into what it is today.
Yeah.
But I think back then, because you didn't see that style of bike. Like Dice is always trying to stay ahead of like it just gets to a point where it's just not as
ahead of the mainstream, more or less.
Yeah, it was way ahead of the mainstream. It's how you feel in the discussion we had about the scene of performance.
Yeah.
It starts off as a really kind of beautiful thing that you're passionate about, and there's a few other guys doing it, and you connect with those people, and you have this small community, and then people start jumping in on it, and they jump in, and then it's just blown out. It's still cool, it's fun, but it's like, man, it just doesn't have that
intimacy almost.
Intimacy, yeah. I fly so much now with work, and when I used to only ride, and it's crazy how I can be in a plane and look down and know right where I'm looking, because I'm like, I've ridden. For some reason, it seems like the flight paths seem to follow major interstate systems or something. I don't know, but I look down and I'm like, oh, I know right where that's. Yeah. I know right where I'm at. Stop. Yeah, and but I think about the time when you would have an issue, and there would always be somebody would drive 200 miles out of their way to come help you. Yeah. Because it was really intimate like that. I feel like now it's changed because there's so many people. I
don't feel like people feel like they own any of it. Like when it's a small thing, it's like you feel like you have a responsibility to it.
Yeah.
Almost like an ownership to take care of it. But then when it's blown out of the water, there's so many people there that like you feel like you don't own anything. It's not yours anymore. It's now, the world's.
Yeah.
And you don't have the same connection to it anymore.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of look at it.
I was feeling like, man, if I were to have a situation on the side of the road and need help, it just doesn't feel like someone would be there as quickly today as it was back then, when they would travel from longer distances to come. Like we were stuck in Wyoming once, and a friend needed a generator, which I think we were in Cheyenne, and we had a friend drive up from Denver just to give him a generator.
Yeah.
And then drove back home, and that's the way it was, and people didn't hesitate to do that for you. Now I think it's just like, it's kind of changed in that way, where it's like, oh, you got an issue, I guess you'll sort it out,
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, and I also, like I said, I've been the recipient of some amazing service over the last year, and so it's hard to say that I don't think it's that. I just, like I said, it just feels so less intimate, and you don't feel like it's almost like everybody's grown out of that phase, and that's kind of one of the things I was talking to. Forget who I was talking to about this. I think maybe with Todd off air about, because when you listen to his podcast, you could tell that he misses an era.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, man, what do you? It's like, I know what you're feeling, because I miss a certain aspect. 2020 for us on Performance Baggers was like the fucking time to be alive. We're all over the country. We're fucking like, this is before the mask mandates, and you could still go into kind of rural restaurants and have fun, and it was just the best time to be alive. All the big shows were done. They were shut down, so all the small shit rose to the top. All the small little field parties and fucking, random ideas just worked, and it was fucking amazing. And then Harley comes out with actually they've been doing a good job, but they really hit the nail on the head with the ST, the lowrider and the bagger ST, to give a scene what it actually wanted from the dealer, which was awesome to see it grow, but not knowing that, oh shit, now the barrier of entry is a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that same aspect of earning anything, like. I
think that's just it, earning.
Yeah.
Like now with all the aftermarket companies, it's great. You can go and you can, in a catalog, build an entire bike.
Yeah.
It wasn't ever like that. So you had to earn it. And in those first couple of years, it's more of a special thing where everyone watches each other's back because they're so passionate about it. But then once it becomes a thing where you don't have to earn it so much, there's just all these people out there floating around. It's like, and also with the way social media is, it's just like, fast. Oh yeah, there, and it's just kind of loses its intimacy and loses, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but It's just not as special.
My buddy Corey from Main Drive Cycle says this a lot, and he said it in this when we were doing this FXR tour thing, and he goes, man, he's like, we're living in the good times. And if you keep that mentality going, like I should have, how do I word this? I was living the best version of performance baggers to me in 2020. It bled into 21 and whatnot, but at the time, you don't think to yourself, like, obviously it's definitely grown and become bigger than it was then, but that version of it for me, that was it. That was the last of that. It was downhill for me, for my interest in it, not that I'm not interested in it, but like, my connectivity to it, right? And so it's kind of like when I brought up Todd and he's talking about these good times, it's like you have to, as you get older, you start to realize like this shit's gonna end.
Yeah.
None of these great times last forever. Even if it's all on the best of terms, somebody's gonna get married, someone's gonna buy a house, someone's gotta get a job, And so every time you're on these bikes crossing the country like that, you gotta think of it like this might be the last time that we all get to do this together. Yeah. And it makes it more romantic. It makes it more intimate because you're literally looking at it with a different set of glasses on. You know what I'm saying?
Well, again, on that timing note is I had that golden era of all these guys that were artists, the tattoo artists, they were creatives, they had their own businesses. And when we all met, I think everyone had this like really cute, sweet girlfriend. And then we started roaming around, partying way too hard. We all lost our girlfriends all within like the same couple of weeks. And then it was like, boom, then it was 110 miles an hour from there. We were just chasing everything and everyone was on the same page. And it was just timing and the right group of people. And again, like for me, my style of photography, I always was attracted to an earlier time period. Mm-hmm. So the period correct choppers fed into the way I shot photography, and the guys that I was photographing fit the look of their bike. We were in these rural places, so it just created these timeless photographs. Mm-hmm. And then I was just I was living on an Ironhead, and it just treated like that just became a part of me. I could have other things, but still to this day, I'm still riding it because I also respect that machine because it took me to where I am now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be shooting for Harley Davidson as their staff photographer. It was that bike and timing in the way that I ended up, like I'd been shooting for Harley since 2009, but was always just freelance. I wanted that freedom. And when I bought this place, they're like, well, you're in Milwaukee now. Let's bring you in full time. I was like, I ain't taking a corporate job. Mm-hmm. And so it took a lot of convincing, but it kind of hit at the right time because that was the tail end of my friends started having more committed jobs, starting businesses, getting married, having kids. And one by one, they all kind of fell off and like those big trips just weren't happening anymore. I can't think of a big trip that has happened that I missed. And I haven't really done big trips with my friends since I've really taken the job full time, which was 2017 that I started shooting full time. I mean, I'm riding all the time for work and for other things, but timing again, I was like, should I have not taken the job? Would my life be different? But I was like, well, that era faded off and it was a golden era. Now I'm in another golden era of a different thing.
And that's kind of what I had took from listening to Todd, listening to Corey, and applying it to my own life is like, oh, I need to be more mindful of the times that I'm having now and, be appreciative of that now. And then because just not to be a nihilist or a pessimist in the situation, but all these things will change and evolve. We were kind of swapping stories earlier, like back in 2004 when I was riding sport bikes, because I didn't know you could have cheaper Harleys. I didn't know they existed. Man, I got times where me and my buddies would do a bike night and then do this and go to the club and try to take girls around the block on the bike. And next thing you know, we're at IHOP at 6 a.m. on a Thursday, or now it's Friday. And I'm like, I can't do that now. I don't want to do that now.
Yeah.
But goddamn, I'm glad I did it. You know what I'm saying? And it's good to remember the same way you remember that chain falling off, or it's good to remember all these things and start appreciating. I think that getting older, like, you get more perspective and you start to see things. And when you're enjoying a great group of friends at a bike night now, or a group that you've kind of connected with here, to just appreciate that for what it is and not try to manipulate it or squeeze it too tight or restrict it or make someone feel bad for, evolving out in a way, and just realize that's part of like human nature for all of these things to flow in and out.
I have to remember that more myself. I'm very blessed in the life that I have and the life I've had, especially now. Like, I can get caught up in the corporate world. It's a whole different thing. It's like it's more of it's what's best for the company or what people think is best for the company. So you're a lot of times told what you need to do, what you need to create. And even I just did 2,000 miles 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, in the beginning, I would have been like, oh, this is not my world, or I don't know. I guess it's always been my world. To me, bottom line, riding and being on a trip is where my heart is. But riding and staying at a hotel every night, like, you ride to a point, like, you kind of lose the soul of, in the time that I was traveling, it was, you would ride, you would camp out, or you'd stay at a friend's place, and there was all this color happening outside of the ride. And that's what I was photographing mainly.
Yeah.
And then it turns into, like, now it's more like ride a bunch of miles on a really cozy bike, a bike that operates in the every way it should.
Yeah.
The new road glides are insane now.
I want to get one. I do plan to buy one, so I'm not trying to say I'm out of performance baggers, but
they're unreal. They're just, they're such great bikes, and to get on one of those, man, I would do 1,000-mile days on my Ironhead.
Yeah.
That's all I knew was what a 1,000-mile day was on a rigid chopper, Ironhead chopper at that. Yeah. The first time I did 1,000 miles I did it on a street glide. I got home, because it's a company bike. Like, I got home, I parked it, I got on my chopper, I went out and got tacos, had a drink, and met up with some friends, and then went to a pool party. Like, if I had done that on my chopper, I'd just been like out for another day. But I was doing that day. Like, I remember coming back from California one year, and we did 1,000 miles and then another 1,000 miles. We took a day off in between, but stopped and saw a friend. But 1,000 miles on a road glide is like nothing.
Easy, yeah.
But anyway, like, I have to, like, I'm realizing now, like, there was a time when I'm like, oh, I'm not on my chopper, or I'm not, like, with my friends traveling. I'm with these other people that I'm not so connected to. But just on this last ride, it was just like, and I even talking to, who's my boss now, we've been peers for all these years. And, like, in the corporate grind, you're like, go here, do this. It's just like, there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of stuff that's maybe not so glorious, or stuff that you want to be doing. But he even heard in the tone of my voice, he's like, man, because I was so, after the first day, the first ride, I was checking in with him. He's like, I can just hear it in your voice. Like, this is where you need to be.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I need to be on the road. I need to be riding a motorcycle and then capturing people doing what they're passionate about, and honestly doing what they're passionate about. So it was really great to get on this last ride. I've done some pretty big rides this year.
Yeah.
Been putting out a lot of miles. It's just in a different way of doing it, But
this one, you were kind of left to, like, the freedoms of your imagination, how you want to shoot and portray it.
Yeah.
Which gets another gear that may not have been rolling the same way.
Yeah.
In the
yeah,
cognitive.
because I mean, in the corporate commercial world, I mean, there's a strict focus on, there's storyboards and there's shot lists, and there's still like they needed to get what they needed to get, but that all comes a part of like rolling and shooting with that. But to be able to break away from that and just have the freedom. And the photos I got, some of my favorite photos, and bringing them back to the team, they're like, wow, we never thought we would get anything like this just from putting you on a bike and letting you roll.
Yeah.
It's kind of sometimes it goes in phases where I'll do a lot of that, and then sometimes I won't.
Yeah, but being on all the time in a creative space, and just, that's one of those things that, like, as I feel like calling yourself an artist, sometimes even calling yourself a photographer, I feel like that's something bestowed upon you from other people.
I don't ever call myself a photographer.
I just
Or
feel
an artist.
weird, like, I like to say that I love art, and I, whatever. That's not the point of what I'm trying to say, but knowing that anytime I pull, like, if I say, hey, Josh, let's go do this, I want to get some shots of your bike, getting to that point of feeling confident that I'm going to be able to walk away with at least 2 or 3 images that I'm stoked about is something that at the beginning of my photography journey, I'm like, I don't know, man. I've the most elaborate shit I've ever tried to put together, I've walked away with less, so it's like knowing all the different variables and honing all these different ways you can shoot, and applying that to the sun, the weather, the vibe, and all this is something that you can only achieve, I think, through time. And so while I feel like I've gotten lucky in my path of photography to get a couple cool shots that really capture the essence of what it was like at that time, I feel like I'm still learning so much, as I'm sure every photographer or anybody that dabbles in any of this type of creative space does, to where on this trip I'm on now, I'm like accepted that if I could just be better at this, more aware, more in tune with like this camera and what I can do with it, I'll take that as a win if I get nothing else out of this.
I think you're overthinking it.
Oh, I told you I had to fucking overthink it.
Yeah. You just have to go. You know what? I think my best advice, and this is also advice that I'll give when there's people that like, what's if you could give any advice about photography, and how to be successful, my advice is always shoot what you're passionate about, shoot what you love, and don't overthink it. Like, I think you're overthinking it in a way where if you just, my friends know it just from riding with them. They won't see me take a photo. It could be the middle of the day. We could ride for 300 miles. I don't touch my camera. And then all of a sudden, like, something will happen. The clouds will break, or it gets later in the day, or there'll be a bridge or something, and all of a sudden I'm like up on the bike, I'm shooting, or I start shooting like crazy. But it's all about it's not like I'm searching for anything. I'm not like constantly scanning. I'm just like, when it appears, I'll take it. But if I miss it, then I've missed it. That's how my style adapted from riding with a group of people and photographing people on journeys. Like, I would never ask anybody to alter their path. I wouldn't ask them to go back and redo anything. And when you're riding in a tight pack, and this is something, especially this last trip, because it was 60 motorcycles, 60 bikes in a pack. And I was quite surprised how tight everyone was rolling. Mm-hmm. If you're at the front of the pack and you're moving around and you're constantly hitting the brakes, or you're speeding up, slowing down, weaving in and out of the pack, the back of 60 bikes, that's like stop, go. And someone is either going to be really pissed off, or it's going to cause an accident. Mm-hmm. So that's always top of mind in my shooting style, is I don't want to affect people's trajectory around me, be it the pack I'm in or cars. Yeah. That's the biggest thing in that pack. When we're on the interstate, a lot of times it'd be in the left lane and cars couldn't get around, and all of a sudden there's these pissed off people that are now about to run bikes over because they're so pissed off and frustrated. So I've always been aware of that from when I first started shooting. It's like respect. I don't own the road. I don't own this planet. It's everyone's planet. And I want to give the respect to everyone to use it freely and not be, not interfere with their life and what they're doing. So in the pack, I would be in my position. If I started on the left side of the lane, stay there until we came to the next gas stop, and I might end up somewhere else on the next run. But in packs, you kind of tend to fall in the same places. And also like a thing of mine is like I never pass the road captain. I've never used that term road captain, but that's kind of a thing, you know, in big packs and other people's packs that they ride in. But like passing the guy up front, like I took advantage of it a few times on this last trip because we had another lane and there was no traffic and it was just an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like in the rain, like another thing is like when you get crazy weather patterns and stuff, a lot of times you don't see that in photos. On this last trip, I got quite a few rad photos in the rain with the road glide. You have that protection. Was able to get in front of the pack and shoot this amazing photo of a pack of 60 bikes in the rain in a valley, you know, with the clouds and the lights reflecting off of the wet pavement. So yeah, but first and foremost is respect to the pack and how the pack works. And two is the people around me, that are just going about their day and their world.
Yeah. The part of this trip, you know, the first half of it being out in California the whole time, perfectly blue skies everywhere I went, like no diversity in the sky.
Yeah.
And then when I was in Colorado, I was like, man, I should probably just go ahead and go over. And then I had a bunch of storms. It's like, fuck, I'm gonna go home. So I went home, lay over, got the tire, and then watching the weather. And then, you know, we talked and I'm like, all right, cool. If I do get rained on, it might create a new opportunity to tell I shouldn't be avoiding the obstacles of this journey.
Yeah.
I should just be doing the journey and dealing with the obstacles as they come. But as you ride a lot of fucking miles, you're like, you know what? I have an extra day. I can wait this storm out.
Yeah.
You know, and so
it's inevitable. You ride that many miles, you're gonna get caught in the rain. Some of my favorite photos are, like I have this photo, it's at a gas stop and it's under an on, everyone's huddled, and this was a time no one had proper rain gear or could afford proper rain gear. So everyone's got a garbage bag on. It's duct taped around them. And then sitting under an awning, everyone's soaking wet. And you see one guy's like sitting there, he's all pissed off. And there's another guy. It just shows the personality of the people in your group. One dude's just laughing hysterically. You know, you just, in that image, you could just see everyone's personality in that shitty situation.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it always sucks to have to go through it. But when you look back on it, and when it comes to being a photographer, those are the times that you want. And I struggled with that early on when somebody was like, when we were, you know, stuck on the side of the road. I was always antsy, like we need to get there, we need to get there, we need to get there. And when you let go of that, you realize, oh shit, all these moments stuck on the side of the road. Those are the moments that most people in this world don't even know or understand. But when they see it in a photograph, it makes them want to look deeper into that or understand what's going on there.
Yeah, the pause is like, you know, of course everybody's heard that the journey is not the destination, the journey is the point. I don't know what the fuck I'm ruining that inspirational quote in HR. But basically, like on this trip or on like other trips, it's like we've had our fair share of things. I mean, we had a dude fucking had his sprocket pulley stuff come out in New York, get trailered to Syracuse Harley, and then he's just like, fucking, I'm buying. Like it was a pretty new Softail Sport Glide. You know, the one little bikini fairing they had in the front?
Yeah.
And he just fucking traded it in and bought a Road King and finished the rest of the trip on that, you know? Then he, you know, I think they took it back or was something. He really couldn't afford it. Let's just put it that way. But
well, that Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking back to that same trip where we met Tom, my tire situation. I mean, there's a bunch of situations, because that was a new bike to me. Like, I had bought it, and like the guy's like, "Oh, it needs a full rebuild." Well, the spark plug threads were fucked up, and no one had changed the spark plug in it. So anyway, but it was kind of an untested bike, and I took it on that trip anyway. And all the rivets so the sprocket that's riveted to the brake drum, they all came out. So we were in, I think it was Grinnell, Iowa, and it was just like, I just didn't have power, and the sprocket spinning on that. So literally, my friends pushed me. We met a guy. I think my friends went to the next gas station, and I was on the side of the road, and they met a guy who's like, "Well, I got a welder," and so. Basically got pegged to his garage. He just zapped that sprocket to the brake drum, and then we got to the party as the sun was setting. You know, stuff like that. So we met that guy, and then on the way back, like I had an issue. My friend Slippery Pete was like, let me get it. He got his hands in there. We're trying to put the new inner, because I had an inner tube with me, and as we're changing the inner tube of the tire, it gets pinched. So now I have two tubes that have punctures in them, and no one else had another tube. So we go to the gas station, we get a bicycle patch kit, and it had probably been sitting on the shelf for like 15 years. It's all dried up, and I'm like trying to get it to stick. And we're taking the tire back and forth to the gas station to get air, and anyway, it doesn't hold air the first time. Shit, we go back, do it again, and it holds air the second time, but it's really iffy, and like clouds are coming in. All my friends are like hungover as hell. They're like, we just need to get on the road and get out of here. So 21 inch, it's a, skinny little 3.0 21 inch tire. And every time we'd hit a bridge or a bump, I'd be like, oh man, I'd just be waiting for that tire to go. We got to a truck stop. I think it was an abandoned. I don't know why because Slippery Pete had an issue with his carburetor. He was running an S&S, and he didn't have an air cleaner on it. And those S&S carburetors are really finicky if you don't have an air cleaner on it. So we pull off to this abandoned truck stop, and we're getting ready to get back on the road. And I just, for some reason, I pinched the side of the tire to just check if it was holding the air, and it goes pfft. It's like, oh shit, lost all the air. So then it's Sunday, we're calling around. There's this guy, he has a motorcycle shop, and his answering machine was literally like, if you are inquiring about a British or Japanese motorcycle, please hang up now. But if you're inquiring about an American Harley Davidson and you need assistance immediately, call this number. So then it was a cell phone number. And then we call him. He's like, oh, I'm in this NRA meeting right now. He's like, but if you need help, all right, just meet me at my place. He gave us the address to his house. Well, then we go there. He has got this like John Deere collection. He's got Sportsters. Then he's like, you guys like guns? And we're like, yeah, we like guns. There was like 3 of us. And the other half had stayed at the truck stop. Yeah. He's like, well, let me show you some of my gun collection. His basement is a vault door. And we go in, his whole basement is like, it's like Civil War and Indian War era guns up to modern. Yeah. And so now we're like in his basement, and we had already taken care of the tire. Yeah. All our friends are waiting at the truck stop, like waiting for us to come back. I'd ridden on the back of my friend's chopper and it's funny because there's a photo of us going down the interstate that some random person took, and it was like, and it ended up on the internet, and I was like, oh, we're going down the interstate. I'm talking in circles right now. But anyway, we met this guy and had this amazing like interaction. Met this guy, and I remember one of the most unique things he had was it was a buffalo vertebrae with an arrowhead stuck in it. Oh shit! It was part of his collection. Like,
where was this at?
This was like outside of Des Moines somewhere. Okay. Gary Hash. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't say his name because
probably the government's like, we can see those guns.
Yeah. But yeah, and he was in a magazine with one of his Sportsters at one time. We saw him in there. But
so this whole time, like, you know, we're talking like before 2015 and stuff. Like, how does, you know, for just, I've listened to like what you've talked about on Todd's and stuff like that, but the whole 21 days thing, like, how does that thing even happen? I know there was a lot of crazy shit. Like, is it happening, not happening, blah, 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 is this, that. Like, I know there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle to come together, but how does it become you, Gentry, Troy, and
Ryan.
Ryan? Yeah.
That was all Michael Schmidt's. That's his baby. You had mentioned 6 Over. That was the first thing that he had done, but it was kind of like he had done that and wasn't really thinking. I don't know. From what I know is that he wanted to create. He had made that thing, and it was well received. People really loved it, but he wasn't happy with it as an artist, as we most of the time aren't happy with. You know, it could always be better. Yeah. So he had this idea of doing this road trip across America with 4 guys, and I think it started like the people kind of changed who he's going to have involved with it. I think at first, like, he had talked to Max Schaff about it, Caleb from Crow Customs. So like, he had hit me up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm down, because I'd already been doing that kind of trip for years before that. So I was, and we were all friends, like, and I'd known Max for years and Caleb for years, and so he was just dialing in how it was all going to work and who it was going to be. And I do remember he scouted it, because that was the Lincoln Highway, and it was the 100-year anniversary of the Lincoln Highway. But like a year before, he had a shovel head that he had ridden from Brooklyn back to LA, and he was scouting it, because he stopped in Rockford, Illinois, where I was at. And I remember him doing that trip, just kind of scouting it. And then, you know, then he had reached out and said, oh, actually, you know, I'm thinking about having Ryan do it, and Troy and Gentry. And I knew all those guys. Like, I had Troy I met at the first Born Free. Gentry I had photographed in Brooklyn at one of the invitationals. I think it was the first invitational or the second invitational. And then Ryan, known for years. But we'd never like ridden a bunch of miles together. I'd ridden with Troy. But so I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm on board, you know. But I did kind of stress to Michael that, like, hey, you're putting 4 dudes together that, yeah, we're all friends, but we haven't ridden a bunch of miles together. Like, to do a trip like that, that's a whole, the miles I was riding with my group of friends, it was already like we had already weeded out people or personalities that kind of rubbed the wrong way. And not to say that was going to happen, but I was like, hey, you're just kind of throwing 4 people together, and it's a long ride. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So be prepared for that. You know, I was kind of on the fence a little bit here. I was like, you know, I guess I'll do it. And my experience of riding across the U.S. was always laughter. Good. Doesn't matter how bad the scenario was. We were always laughing and having a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we met up in the start point was like we met in Salinas, and like I'd never shipped my bike before. I'd already ridden to California and back that year, and I had something else going on. He's like, well, we'll just ship your bike to the start point. I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't ship my bike. That's not my thing. But the way timing worked out, I was like, okay, well, I ended up shipping the bike, but it got lost in shipping. And it was like Labor Day. It was some holiday. I think it was Labor Day weekend. And I get there and they're like, we don't have your bike. We don't know where. And we were trying to call shipping hubs. No one would give us any bit of information. And then think it was Troy. Somebody called and ended up getting the information of who we might be able to talk to, or a shipping yard that it would have went through. And basically, when I signed on the received line. They're like, yeah, John signed for it. I'm like, who the fuck's John? You know, and this is my pride and joy. This is my life. This thing, this machine is my life at that time. It still is. The idea of it like disappearing. Like I was losing my mind for 4 days. So Michael kind of changed the storyline where like I come in is kind of like I meet them in the desert somewhere because I'm like standing on the side of the road taking a piss.
Oh yeah, I remember that scene.
Yeah, and that's right outside of Middlegate, which is a wild place. And the night before, I had sun poisoning and I was throwing up all night. Anyway, so yeah, we ended up getting the bike and yeah, we rode out of there. We stopped up and saw Jason Jesse. That's not part of the film, I don't think.
No, it wasn't.
No. So saw him and Jen. Jen has Bandit Town when they were together. And then we started the trip, went across the Golden Gate. And then I think a lot of the pressure, like we were all good between the four of us. I think Michael was dealing with a lot of stress and like, you know, funding the thing and keeping it going. But it literally was, there was a van which held him and his gear. We could not rely on that van in any way. So there was a guy driving the van and then Michael in that van shooting from it. And then Davey who helped with sound and a few other things. But there was also a woman that why am I drawing a blank on her name? I'm on the spot now with names. I am so horrible with names. Anyway, the more interesting part of the movie was that there was a woman that wrote the narrative, and she had never ridden before. So because I had the contact with Harley supplied a Sportster, and she got her license like the day before, and she was like, I want to know what it feels like for the rain to hit my face. I want to know what the wind burn feels like. So she either was like miles ahead of us or miles behind us on her own journey, and she'd stop at a lookout point and she'd write the narrative. And I thought that was a really kind of special thing that she went and did that. God damn it, I feel horrible for like forgetting her name. I don't know how we can edit this, but
it's all good.
She'd see this and
the thought.
me.
I mean, you're genuine with the fact that you care that you forgot, so that's what matters. It's just you didn't forget. It's just you're just drawing a blank in this whole conversation we're having. So,
but yeah, so all that narrative was written by her as she experienced the road, and then we would meet every night at our meeting point, whether we were camping or staying at the clubhouse or wherever we were staying. But it just felt like there was times where it got heavy. There were a lot of bike issues along the way. Gentry had a lot of issues with his bike, and I think really what it amounted to was the motor mounts, the bolts holding the motor into the frame were loose to begin with, and the motor was vibrating, so the frame was cracked, and then everything else was like vibrating apart, and so we completely tore it down to the frame in Milwaukee here. We got to Milwaukee to Warren shop. Yeah. Completely tore it down to the frame. I welded up the seat post too. Yeah. So I welded up the seat post tube, which Brandon from Mullins Chain Drive, he welded it up without taking the bike apart before we left, which was crazy for him to get in there with a TIG welder. And then, because Warren was into racing, he like the trick with the 45 frames is to run a threaded rod down through the seat post tube. and put a washer on each end with a nut, and then just tighten that down to hold it all together. So if it broke,
at least that would there.
Yeah. But yeah, that thing. So we did that in 2013, and then Michael was just like trying to get it out. You know, he was just in a hard spot in his life, and trying to edit it. And of course, that's a hard thing to try to do. You know, like you could edit it 10,000 different ways, and it's like, but he just needed a little bit more push. So I think Fox needed to hit their quota for Netflix, and they're like, well, there's this film that's like shot, and it's just needs to have the final touches. So then like 3 years later, like the opening interviews are actually 3 years after we did it. So he came back out. It was the middle of winter, that first riding scene that I'm in. It was like 20 degrees outside, and we had to make it look like it fit into the film. But
it's crazy. I mean, were there any changes on the bike between, like, they would have been noticed?
No. I mean, if you look at it today, it's pretty much the same, other than the motor's changed. I still need to put that original motor back together. That motor has like the memories.
Yeah, it has some engraving and stuff like that on it too, right?
Which I could show you. I had reshaped the rocker boxes and done some engraving, and then had blown that motor, the trans apart on that.
You know, Troy passed away a handful of years back, but I've heard so many stories about this guy being so, like, he just this like a real kind, gentle, but respectable guy.
Yeah.
What was it like riding with him and just being, that whole aspect, because like I said, he's not around for us to.
I mean, we rode together. When you're on the road like that, you find your person that you like to ride next to. We rode together really well because, I don't know, I'm on that Ironhead. I gear it tall. I got a tall trans sprocket on it. But I don't know, they kept having an issue with me going too fast.
Okay.
But Troy was always right next to me. Troy would always run right, and we'd always run really good together. Ryan was probably always watching out for Gentry, because Gentry was having his issues. So riding beside him was always great. And he had such a, I don't know, I didn't realize how old he was until that movie came out, and he's talking about something in the start of the movie where he's talking about 69 or 68 or I think it was 68 he was born. So he wanted his birth year shovelhead.
Yeah.
I was like, 68? You're that old? I had no clue. But he was, he'd ride his mountain bike every day. He was in shape, but he still he lived like, I don't know, he was an interesting guy where he just lived by his own terms, where he was a great photographer. I really wish that, I need to not run into this issue where I pass away and none of my work gets out and published in a book somewhere. It's everywhere, floating in the world, but no one really knows where it's at. But yeah, he was an amazing photographer. But he was early blog too, Chico Moto. But yeah, he just kind of lived by his own terms. Like he had this I don't know, pessimistic side to him, but he was also always there. He kind of, when he started doing the Death Valley run, it brought a lot of people together. He was always kind of he was always a constant in the community and a glue to the community, and had a lot of respect.
That's cool. Yeah, I'd, listen to the podcast that Todd had put out where it was like, I guess Rocco did some recordings.
Yeah.
It was just cool to kind of hear that. And then as I've gone back and tried to buy as many old Dice magazines as available on their website and then find them on like a YouTube or eBay and shit, you flip through, and as a lover of photography, I'm like, oh shit, Troy shot that. Oh shit, this and that. And So you start to see more of his work, like you said, kind of scattered amongst the media that's out.
Yeah.
That's I don't know, that shit's cool. And it's cool to maybe be immortalized, if you will, like what y'all experienced together on that video. And it's kind of like what I was kind of getting at to you earlier, and what I've kind of told Todd whenever I got to hang out with him. It's like these things that you guys did that seems like a lifetime ago are now inspiring people now that are wanting, like, I feel like now we're so over scrolling. We're so over all these things that have made consuming things easier, to where we want something a little more tactile. We want to get off our phone and get on the laptop and go see, a blog or go watch a movie. I don't know. I feel like it's got it. To me, it's always been there, but it's really impactful to me now, even though I knew it had already existed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like I'm not finding this for the first time. I already knew it was there, but now I see it in a clearer way that it's actually resonating more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It is wild. I mean, when you're so close to something, you just don't even want to see it or talk about it.
Yeah.
It was kind of a challenging trip. It wasn't my favorite trip.
Yeah.
Also, the movie kind of portrays it in a really kind of dark, lonely. I don't know. I mean, there's glimmers of breaths of fresh air, and I actually like it because the music. I love the soundtrack. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rocco is so amazing, and
Willie T. Taylor.
Yeah.
Stevenson Ranch Davidians, I think is what their name was. I love. I found that music through that. I was like, oh shit, this is rad.
I saw Willie T recently, and I went up to him after the show, and he's like, oh man, like. It's really great because like sometimes like during that era, like I knew like the crowd of people that would show up, like, oh, the motorcycle guys. And so he had a good and still he's like, he knows when people pull up, like, oh, it's probably because of that movie, but I love his music, and I love music that's all the music I listen to is dark and sad, or has a really deep undertone to it. Mm-hmm. So I like the feel of the movie, but in general, when I think about the trips I've done with my closest friends, it's like it's never like that. It's never like a struggle like that, or it's never that deep. Like we're all just out having fun, but it was a different group of people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the era of me doing it with my friends was every night, wherever we landed was a party, and it was excessive in a lot of ways. So that was the trip I knew. I wasn't so hungover every time I woke up on this trip. I mean, we had moments where we had a good time, but
how do you and some other friends of yours end up in a Lana Del Rey video?
That was Will, the first guy I met, the black guy backing up on the Panhead. He moved out to LA kind of early on, and he's this kind of guy that can just, and it had to have been tough. Like I couldn't imagine being a black man in that community, especially in that things have changed now. But in that time, like he could just show up and just talk to anyone and kind of put any, he could bulldoze any barriers, and he just became immediately, as soon as he moved to California, he was friends with all the big name bike builders, all the builders that we loved and looked up to. And he had that way of just like showing up somewhere and having connections. But then he was in that Hollywood world and he was making connections, and I don't know, he knew somebody who was looking for real bikers. Because I was the photographer and had all the photos, and we had the tight group of friends, they just reached out and asked for photos of maybe possible people that they can use. Like, we want to use you, but send us photos of your friends. So I did, and Bobby Goodtimes was a part of that.
He was telling me some of the story,
Yeah, and friend Brian, one of the first guys I met through Will. And I think that was the same year. That was the same year that we did that ride. So I'd already had ridden to California and back, had ridden from coast to coast, and then from Brooklyn back home, and then around the lake. So they needed him. It was literally in the next 2 days they were going to shoot it. So we all loaded up in a truck. We drove straight out there to Vegas from Chicago, and ended up out there and had no idea what it was going to be. Showed up and parked the bikes. Lana came out and just kind of said hi to everyone, and then just kind of pointed me out. And so I just went with the flow, and we went and just kind of rode around for a while so you get used to the bike. And then we did the riding scenes, and then it just kind of kept turning into more and more, I think. And I don't think it was really planned. It was just kind of a free-flowing video, but they had already shot a couple days before. The day before, they had other people that were part of the lover scenario. Yeah. But I think she was just having a lot of fun. I mean, we're all having a lot of fun. And I mean, actually, I just ended up, when I was on this last trip, I was going through Nashville, and Shabuzi, who has become really popular, just like that overnight. I've been friends with him for a number of years, and he was shooting a music video, and it was a party scenario, but none of it was real alcohol or liquor. Well, this one, the Lana Del Rey one, was real. It was real liquor. So Anthony Madler was like, "Hey, I hear you like Jack. So we got a bottle of Jack coming for you, and that's your girl. Anything goes. You do anything you want." I'm like, she just looked at me. It's like, anything goes. And it was like, I was like, "Can I get that bottle of Jack right now?" And I just started slamming Jack. And then before you know it, we're tossing each other around and just had a really good night. It just all felt natural. Yeah. And I think she was having fun, and I was having fun. Everyone else was having fun. I think maybe I'm saying too much here, but it was an Indian reservation. Yeah. There's the gas station, which is also a fireworks emporium. Yeah. At that, right when you're going into the Valley of Fire. So they got a bunch of skids, and literally you could see the gas pumps. The gas pumps felt, I was pretty hammered at the time by then, but it felt like the gas pumps were only about 100 feet away from where we had this bonfire. And they're like, "Oh, we got the fireworks coming." And they gave me another handle of Jack. And then we were riding through the fire, and it was just everyone let loose. Everyone was having a good time. I remember being on my bike and a friend whipping a string of black cats. It was like a 5-foot string of black cats as I'm coming by. And I just have for my gas tank cap, it was just a bung, and it needed to be vented. So I just drilled a little hole in it to vent. And if there's too much gas, it just splashes out. Yeah. And I'm hopping, it's in the video. You can see me hopping by, and my friend Sean throws a lit strand of these black cats, and it wraps around my neck, and it's just going off. And I'm going through the fire. I'm like, man, I'm gonna light myself up. But Sean ended up crashing his bike pretty bad, because we were shooting the initial scene, and then, which was 10 miles into the park. And then we're going to shoot another scene out near the gas station. And in between, I was just ripping, and he was following me. And there's just sand dunes that kind of blow across the road out there. And I was going through the turn, and I don't know, I saw the sand, and I just kind of went through the turn, went through it. And he was following me and hit the sand. And then I just remember looking back and seeing a headlight just flipping through the desert. He had split open his arm really bad. And but that was a previous thing that happened in Chicago. He wanted to be, it's a whole nother story. He ended up cutting his arm open, wanted to be blood brothers with someone. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But Yeah, it was wild and it was real. You know, it
Yeah.
was kind of like, I don't think we're meant to have a part in it at all, really, other than just kind of riding by. But I think everyone was just having fun and it felt real and they just kept saying action.
Yeah.
And that's what that was.
That's wild, man. I'm a fan of her. I like a lot of her music, and so when I paint bikes, I like to listen to female artists.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about just their vocals are just so much more soothing to listen to while I'm, laying out graphics and designing and shit. And I had her at the time was the greatest hits of it, and it's like every song's a banger. It's like,
Yeah.
so I dig all that stuff. But
Yeah, I didn't know her music until I was asked to be a part of the video, and then I listened to it. I was like, I actually like it.
Yeah.
And I listened to it a lot. And
It's got that melancholy undertone thing that's kind of dark, but it's real honest,
Yeah.
Is what I like about it,
And since then, we've stayed in touch.
That's cool, yeah.
Last year, I was out in LA and had dinner with her. And then, I mean, we kind of like, it's weird how the circles work, and then traveling and friends, and like we have a lot of mutual friends as well, just through music, and it's just kind of crazy how small the world gets. But again, like I stated earlier, like I get pigeonholed into being like, oh, the chopper guy, but 2 wheels is 2 wheels to me, and being out riding is ultimate number one.
Yeah.
Growing up, my dad had an ultra classic that he would ride through the winter. And I remember friends when I was in high school, like, oh, your dad's that crazy dude that rides in the snow. Well, that was the only time he got to ride, because he worked through spring, through the fall, and then he would come home, and his off season was during the winter, and he would ride his ultra classic through the snow. And so that's how I grew up. And then if he was home during the summer, he'd ride the shovel heads. And so I always had an appreciation for touring bikes.
Yeah.
And I remember the first trip that really changed my whole life was, I have family in New Mexico, and we would go out for Christmas. And there was one year, I think it was 2004 into 2005 was Christmas. My dad, because we'd go down with the family, and we pulled a trailer. He had his Ultra Classic and then the 69. And we got out there, and we would do these little 3-day journeys. We would leave south of Albuquerque, go down to White Sands, Carlsbad.
Yeah.
And we'd do
Cloudcroft, all that, yeah.
Yeah, do little 3-day trips. And that was the first time, because I grew up in the Midwest, flat cornfields. So to be riding in that landscape was like, it was mind blowing. I never want to stop doing this.
Yeah.
And I want to find a way to never stop doing this. And then we would get back, and he would stay with the family, and then I would get on his Ultra Classic and ride up into the mountains. And so I've always had an awareness of the beauty of all of those things, and can respect all of those things. And then growing up with my friends, who are still, some of them to this day are like, fuck the factory, choppers only, I'll ride a chopper till I die. Now they're coming around. I've never had that mentality.
Yeah.
Motorcycling, there's a beauty, there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
Is my heart into riding old motorcycles? Yeah, because like you're saying, they're rigid. You can feel every vibration. You can feel the road. My bike is so finicky because it's so skinny and narrow that the wind gusts a little one way or the other, and
takes you with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also a piece of art that I created, and it doesn't look like any other bike. And you have that, rolling down the street. People look at it differently. Do I need that attention, or am craving that attention? No, but I'm proud of this thing that I created, and can ride from one coast to the other coast. And there's pride in that, and it's yours, and it's unlike anything else that anybody else has. So, but yeah, I have a respect. I mean, I haven't really gotten into any other manufacturers.
Yeah.
Harley Davidson
Don't
has
get me
always
started.
been in my blood, and I mean, I've ridden other bikes, but I've just never connected. And I always equate it to sound frequency.
Mm-hmm.
That sound of a Harley Davidson, I think, or other bikes, I think people are connected to a frequency. So that low droning sound of a Harley Davidson, I think it hits certain people in the chest a different way than somebody that's into sport bikes. They don't connect with Harley Davidson because it's just like they connect to a different frequency or a different vibe. And
Same way people have with music and stuff like that, you know.
And I've said this before, like if you took 6 people and put them in a lineup, and then you had a recording of their bike, and you could only identify those people by the sound, I think you could probably match them up pretty.
I think I could
easily.
with my group, my core group of guys. Yeah, I've ridden next to them, each one of them enough.
Well, I'm just saying, just personality between different manufacturers.
Okay,
of bikes.
okay, yeah,
like sport bike, people just have a different frequency that they operate on, which is a different look, a different fashion, a different style. So if you took a sport bike rider, a Harley Davidson, you know, whether it's even a chopper or you know, the world of performance bagger, like that old chopper sounds different. You know, it's just there's a resonance that people gravitate towards, and that's what they like. So then when you talk about changing up the dynamics of a motor, like again, like these motors, in knucklehead up, the overhead valve, it's the same basic design all the way up to current motor of the Softails and the touring bikes. And if you, it's like you think about brands that have held. If you take the Icon that they came out with, the Softail. If you took a silhouette shot of that and lined it up with a 36 knucklehead, it's pretty much basically the same. It's the same silhouette. Maybe you could argue that it's closer to a panhead with a Hydroglide.
Yeah.
But it's the same silhouette. It hasn't changed. How many brands can you think of other than Fender and Gibson that have ran out the same design and same feel for all those years? There's something there. They hit it on the head in the beginning. And then as soon as you start to deviate from that, it looks foreign. It looks, and then everyone's gonna, it is, I will admit, the new Road Glide and Street Glide design, I've seen it for years now because I've been photographing it. Being in the labs, I see stuff before people see stuff. When I first saw the redesign, I was like, I don't know. I don't, this is not me. I don't like it. But that's anything new that you see. It's foreign, it's different. Now, I was in Laconia on a brand new Road Glide, and I'm seeing all, you know, a Street Glide or a Road Glide that's only a couple years old. I'm like, man, that looks archaic to me.
Yeah.
Like it's already being programmed into my brain that like this is a new, fresh version, and it takes a little bit of time to like get used to something like that. But the Road Glides and the Street Glides now, they just look so archaic to me now, or they look old.
Yeah.
You know, because they were that same design for.
Yeah, trust me. Like the first Road Glide I bought new was a 2012, and that body style is now way old compared to, you know, like when the Rushmore series came in and stuff like that. So yeah, it's I don't know. We all kind of felt like as soon as Indian came out with the Challenger that it was going to push things more into the performance space of like, you know, now there's a new race. Yeah. Not necessarily a race on the track, but a race to stay competitive in a market. You know what I mean? you get people that are connected to the culture of Harley Davidson or the history or the whatever that, they're pretty much diehard fans. You know what I mean? But then you get this new wave of people who are like, well, I want to see if this one's better. Like, I want better.
Yeah.
And those people are the ones that now you have to make, a better product to suffice like their needs. Most of us were like content with like, just put a better fucking navigation system on here and I'm good. I'll ride this for another 20 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
but also as a brand that has motorcycles from the 30s that are still going down the road.
Yeah.
Like I'm riding like my 77 Ironhead, my first bike. I've ridden coast to coast and back so many times. Like it's still capable of doing that.
Yeah.
No one's thrown away a Harley Davidson, like no one throws away a Harley Davidson. So like that's the other the competitive aspect of like its own brand. Like how do you keep, putting out something that retains its heritage?
Its success is its biggest competitor.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're solid machines that will run forever.
Yeah.
So, it does. I mean, to think about how a brand has done that for that many years and been successful, it's kind of crazy to think about. But it's based in all of the heritage and the history and what you know from growing up, or it's just such a hard thing to describe.
Yeah.
But it is magic.
You get to watch the Bike Riders movie yet?
Yeah, I did.
Did you like it? I mean,
I was really surprised. I thought it was going to be cheesy, and I really do like it.
Yeah.
But that there's a lot of history there that
especially like you grew up in that.
Comes in my right here in Milwaukee and being in Chicago.
Yeah.
So when we had Bravetown, it was pretty. You'll see it when you go there. It's a magical place. We have the bar set up, full bar set up there in the loft. It's a community space, and some of the old timer outlaws would come hang out, and they just like to hang out, and they would tell old stories. And this was 2008, 9, 10. Like those guys would just be hanging out and telling stories of dandelions and that era. So like I had those in my head, and then also going back to going to my first photo class.
Yeah.
Riding that 69 FLH to class with my camera. My instructor was like, "Hey, do you know about this book? Have you seen this book?" And I was like, "Oh, let me see that." And I was like, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because he'd seen that I was riding this old motorcycle. I was into motorcycles and then getting into film. So from that early time, I got an original copy of that book from then. And then to be in Chicago, to hear the stories from these guys' mouths, and then to move to Milwaukee and be like, I pointed out the spot where Funny Sonny was on the back of the bike down Lakeshore or Lake Drive.
Yeah.
So all those places are familiar to me. And then to be really into that book at an early age and be inspired by that book. It's really interesting to see. And I thought it was going to be cheesy, but it and the stories are, I think a lot of that history is just smashed into
it's really adapted, right? It's narratives, or not narratives, but like interviews that are then used to create a story. So they're, that's what I was explaining to people that would ask, like, is this like factual? It's like, there are things factual about it, but it's an adaptive story off of something that took place. Yeah. Off of a real group of people.
I'd like to say it's pretty, even just my time in being around my close group of friends. It starts as something as like, oh, you like motorcycles? I like motorcycles. And you just start hanging out. You might not jive. In our case, it was like guys that rode British bikes and there's guys that rode Harleys. We did a ride around Lake Michigan and boom, that was the split. Like British guys kind of we're all friends, they went one way, we went another way. And friends started to come in and it was a close thing. And then drugs and alcohol become used, prevalently. Yeah. And then we all lose our girlfriends at the same time. And then it's like amped up more, and then it just gets to be too much. And then there's a huge change that happens just based out of it's like being married and you're too close, and we all love each other, but it's rare that, the last time we all got together was for someone's funeral, So, but it happens quick and things happen, but to see, what something can start out as and then what it can turn into, and you add in money and drugs and that time period of the late 60s, the drug culture and hard drugs coming in, that changes everything. And then the ability to make money on that and power struggles. It is true that he got shot by a club member, so that, there's all truth in all of that, so, but even in like these other small worlds, like tiffs happen, you're all close, you're all loving the same thing. And then it's usually about a girl or this or that,
Well, that story, that's definitely the cause of many dramas amongst motorcycle world. I've been saying this forever. I think they need to remake Wild Hogs, but with a serious, not a serious, but a real, I guess serious is the better tone. I think that movie's really great if you take away the goofiness. Yeah. It's got a good storyline. It's got a good premise. And it's got, as you just said, doing these things create their own, like, obstacles, their own things that you have to figure out and overcome. And that's kind of the point of motorcycling, why you get so close to people. I don't know. I'm hoping this movie opens up the doors for more motorcycle things to take place, and maybe at some point pivot from being so heavy about clubs all the time and maybe tell a Harley story about like motorcycling in a different light. You know what I mean? Because every movie I've ever seen that's motorcycle related, if it's a Harley, it's club related. It's some infiltration thing. It's this, and I'm happy those exist. But maybe Harley Davidson and Marlboro Man's pretty much the only one that wasn't a club movie, but it definitely had its like, all right, that shit ain't gonna happen. First off, you left Fort Worth. There's mountains in the background. That ain't real. So,
I do like the fact that it is a time period. Again, like I'm drawn to time period pieces where I think they did a really good job, even with watching it. And I'm not a movie guy. I don't watch movies. I just can't sit long enough to watch movies. But even like the sound of the leather, and the leather and that time period of
where they dressed, where they talked, where they
In the previews, it's like, oh, okay, the accent sounds ridiculous, but in the movie, and also growing up on this, like being around the south side of Chicago, those accents are really thick, and even in Milwaukee here, south side of Milwaukee, it's like those accents are a real thing. So I think they did a really good job with it, and it's just a beautiful piece, and captures that era. And then growing up in Rockford, you have like the whole era of the Outlaws and the Hell's Henchmen, that whole war, and then the Angels. That we're in an interesting area of all of that. And now having some of those same friends that I'm really close with who are in all the different clubs, it's like for me, it's how do you navigate roaming around the U.S. and like try to be still hold all those friendships. You know,
Yeah,
I'm still close with all of them, but it's like I hate to have to tiptoe around anything. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's so funny because the ones that have ended up in some of the big clubs, it's like you can't even imagine them. They're just like sweetheart people, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. And you know, those clubs are portrayed in a certain way. Is some of it real? Yeah. Is a lot of it like misrepresented? I think so. But it's both, you know, so it's real.
So what do you think, you know, you kind of like talked about it here and there, but I mean, you've got a lot of work. I mean, obviously a lot of the things that we've seen from you over the last 8-9 years has been in pages of Harley, you know, the enthusiast, in ads, on Instagram. But do you shoot outside of that ever for yourself, or do you find anything like, do you ever get a chance to go be around this and shoot this because you want to shoot it still, or is it kind of like become?
It got really difficult because what was my personal life and personal joy and passion has become every bit of my life in every corner, it's all smashed into one, when it used to be like Born Free, for example, or the chopper culture was separated from commercial advertising or the corporate world. It was kind of two separate things. But then it's all now like folks that for years I was like, hey, you should check out this person or that person, and then, you know, over the years it's like no, and then over time new people come in, they're like, I want to work with that person, and then it's like now we're working like all like that beginning stages, and you probably feel this in your world of like the people that were there in the beginning, now they have successful businesses in other places. And I think about Warren, who I met. He was one of the first people I met on a motorcycle. Mama Tried, and he's got so many other businesses, you know, and you know, just Grant and Mike and all those people that were kind of in it in the beginning. They all are still here, and they have some sort of successful thing that came out of a natural, real passion for the thing, and again, timing. You're kind of there in the front lines. So now I forget the original question.
Well, just like you know, doing things for yourself, shooting wise, but also like
So that world was a separate world for me, where it was like I could do the corporate thing, but I had my thing. Now everything is just so intertwined.
Yeah.
Where even going to Born Free this year, just for myself, it kind of turned into a weird like work thing. Like, well, some people didn't know I was going to be there, so you know, and I'm trying to like for once keep work and friends like just have a good time without thinking about, because work now with work from home, it never shuts off.
Yeah.
It is, you're on all the time. And there's beauty to working from home where you can work in your space and not have to report into an office, which was mind blowing to me when I first started. Like, my life was on a motorcycle. Now I got to report to it. Motorcycle to me was always riding to a new place, not riding to the same place every day.
Yeah.
You know? So there's beauty in it, but the downside of it is, you know, there's people on the East Coast, there's people on the West Coast. Everyone's working kind of on their own schedule, so you're just always on. It's hard to get away from it. And being that it's a passion, the brand has been deep in my heart for as long as I can remember. So you have this thing that you love, but it's also work. The people that you love are now also working for the brand. Everywhere you go, and I went to Born Free this year, I didn't bring a camera. Everyone that ran into me was like, "Where's your camera? Why aren't you shooting? Where's your camera? Why aren't you shooting?" I'm like, I'm just here to have a good time. I'm just like trying to hang out. I'm just trying to sit and enjoy conversations, because when I'm working events, I know so many people from 20 years of every corner of the motorcycle industry. It's hard to navigate through that. And you had mentioned it earlier, you wish you could just you could be a fly on the wall and not have any connections, because then you can just focus on things and not kind of be bothered or have distractions. Like I walk through and it's like every time I turn around, I bump into somebody. They're partying, they're having a good time. They, like, how you been? It's always, how you been? How you been? And like, I'm trying to work. I want to have that conversation. I want to give you time, but then it's like a knife in my chest of anxiety. You're just like, okay, I gotta focus and do this, but I want to give you time. I don't want to brush you off, so. It's always on. It's never off. So the thought of ever shooting anything, I'm always shooting. Like last year was really intense. I don't know, like the amount of weekends I had off that I wasn't working were very minimal. And then once you're in the work week, everyone's just blowing you up. And when you work through the weekend, and you know how the events are or rides, you're up at 5 a.m. Kickstand's up at 6. You ride through the day. By the time you get dinner, it's 10 o'clock. You're like, you do it all for the passion of love, and I love doing it. But then you go through a year of that and you realize, like, dang, I haven't been home. I haven't seen my mom. I haven't seen my friends. You lose all those connections. And then when you have the free time, which you don't actually have, then it's like, I don't know. I don't find, it's like I'm in it always. So whatever I'm shooting it's always motorcycle related. So yeah, there's no time away to even shoot anything that's personal, that's motorcycle related.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and I say, and it's like I'll plan a trip, or I'll want to do a trip with friends. And then this other job will pop up, and I'm like, I want to be on that job. So I'll cancel my vacation to go do the job, because I'm so passionate about the photography, passionate about the brand. I always want to be there for the team. So I'll give up any vacation that I have to go do that job. So it's like, it's that blessing and evil of like doing what you're so passionate about. And for me, it's the brand, it's photography, it's people, it's travel. Like all those things are what I love. So when it's there in front of you, you're like, yeah, I want to do that. I haven't had a day off in 10 months, but yeah, I want to do that again. Put me out. Why am I not on it? So it's like you're your own worst enemy at that point, when you should probably take a day off.
Yeah, no, I feel on that. I think that a lot of what I was thinking about on my ride in to your place today, it was like 100 miles. And funny story, but me and my buddy we thought we were going to rage last night. I'm like, oh, dude, we had 2 beers, and then we sat on the couch and watched the Nickelback documentary on Netflix, right? And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm definitely talking about this on a podcast at one point. His wife was out of town. They went and took his kid to a softball game or a baseball game or something. So, we're watching this, and they were talking about burnout on there. And I've never experienced that, because I feel like I've always been so driven. I've got a million ideas, and I'm just waiting on an opportunity to like jump on this next idea I have. But Nickelback burnout, one of the guys in the Nickelback was talking about how they got burnt out because they were touring so much, and it just kind of like broke them down, like to the point where they wanted to be home, but then it started to break down they were deteriorating because of how much time they were putting into touring and all that stuff. I've
toured with bands in the sense of the friends that I had in that same motorcycle group. They're like, oh, you play guitar? And then like all of a sudden they're just like, yeah, let's play some songs. And they wrote some songs, they recorded it themselves. And then all of a sudden Metal Blade was like, oh, we'll put it. And then they were doing like world, they're touring Europe for a month, like it just happened like that. And I was on every tour. So, I knew what that was like to be in basically a van or a bus. And I would always drive, so it was that hustle of like drive, unload, set up, play the show, party your ass off, and then sleep on a floor, drive all day. Like that seemed easy, but recently I kind of hopped on with somebody that just has gotten successful, and they're on tour buses, and they have bus drivers, and the schedule is 3 a.m. the bus leaves. They don't check bunks because that's the time it leaves. Like they're not going to wake you up. So they don't check. The bus leaves at 3 a.m. You wake up in a different city. 7 a.m. you're in a different city. And then you wake up and you walk out of the bus and you're like, oh, wait, okay, where am I? What city am I in? And then it seems like you have more time to enjoy your life or have luxuries or whatever. But now when you have that much more fame, it's like everyone's like, hey, can I get an interview? Can I do this? Can I do that? You got to run over here to do this private thing, and then over here to do this. And it never stops. You get on the bus at 3 a.m. and you pass out, and you never stop moving. The wheels are turning. You wake up in a new spot. And man, I only did that. I travel on motorcycles, done 1,000-mile days, 500-mile days consecutively, partying, doing copious amounts of whatever.
Yeah.
Not sleeping. I could do that I was a lot younger too.
Yeah.
I could do that forever, until I stopped.
Yeah.
And then once you stop, then you realize. But this tour situation, it was like, after 4 days of it, like, we played a show in Milwaukee, and they left at 3 a.m., dropped them off at the bus. I went to sleep. The next day I woke up, I was like, oh my God. Then they were already in St. Louis, played a sold out show. I got out of bed to get some Chinese food, and then played a sold out show. And then the next day at 7 a.m., they're already in Nashville at home. Like they ended their tour. And that whole day, I had never really gotten out of bed. I was so burnt out by like the 4 days, the 4 days that they'd done. And I was like, geez, it's a whole nother life, and then if you're adding in party to that, and, just, you're never really sleeping. You're just sleeping in little spurts here and there. And so, I get that burnt out. Like the rock star burnt out is like,
it's the extreme, level. Right?
Yeah.
I think of creativity burnout where, I think what I feel like is coming on to me and what I've started to see in other fellows, people that I know in creative spaces, is that like before you just, let's just use photography since we both kind of know that. Before, all you had to do was take a good picture and give it to this magazine or whoever, the client, whatever it is, and that was it. Then social media came around. It kind of, for a while, gave you the opportunity to get your work out to more people and open up some doors. And then also, Instagram inspired a lot of people to become photographers because it would help their shit grow. And it's like the number one hobby people get into no matter what. So now they have something like a purpose behind the hobby. And so photography goes through the roof, and everything, it kind of floods the market, right?
Yeah.
And then social media now, like, you have to do all these extra steps to get things to be seen. So I'm a photographer, I take a picture of this, but now in order to get my photography seen, I got to make a video of me shooting the photo. And then I have to, turn it around slow and very unassuming. And
I just won't fall in.
I know.
Do it.
And that's why I'm envious of that fact that you were able to skirt around that.
Yeah.
But social media for me is what helps. It made my career, It gave me the chance to get out of a local market, which was, for a lot of people, can be the death of their creative endeavors, of never expanding your art or your thing you make to people who want it based on what it is, not because it's affordable, right? Yeah. So I love social media for the fact that it's inspired me. It's helped me gain so much in my life. And now I'm at this relationship with it where, in order for me to still have any of those things that it once gave me, I now have to take and become something I never wanted to be to do that, you know? And so
I can't force myself to do it.
Yeah.
I know I see people that are really good at it. I can't turn the camera at myself and talk into the camera.
Yeah. I'm not good at it
And
either.
the whole thing about influencers, and it inspires people, but I mean, I feel like I've been really in the weeds. I've been a part of this scene, the culture, whatever you want to call it, in a really intimate way for a long time. I've ridden a lot of miles on a lot of different Harley Davidsons, I should say.
Yeah.
A lot of different styles of bikes, a lot of different terrains, a lot of different weather. But I am not going to appoint myself as an expert in anything. Like, I'm not a self-appointed aficionado to then talk into a camera and make myself an aficionado of anything.
Yeah.
Like, if you want my opinion on something, you want to have a intimate conversation, I'll let you know how I feel. But like, to put that out to the world, that's just not me. I don't know. To me, I feel like it starts to feel narcissistic.
Yes.
And people crave that. And I just kind of stopped using Instagram because you just get sucked into it. Then you're like, oh, who commented? Who liked? How many? Then it's a struggle of like, I need to get more. And I just got sick of it. And I was timing on everything in my life was just, I don't know. I had a girlfriend once. She said, you must just have a golden horseshoe up your ass. I've been very fortunate, and timing and the social media thing too. Like, it came in, and I always did it and I'm a purist in a way that when Instagram started, you take a photo with your phone and you post it right then and there. That's how it started. That's how it was. There wasn't any other way to do it. You couldn't upload your photo into the app. You had to take it through the app. You had to take the photo and post it right then. So all those years, there was a transition when photographers started posting their photos from their camera into Instagram. And I'm like, who the fuck are these people? Like, that's not pure. It's not how it's intended. So I think in 2012, which was one of my most insane years of my life, of just everything, the way the trips I did, the people I was with, the experiences I had, I feel like I lost a whole year with my camera because I was more concerned about taking it with my phone and getting the shot with my phone to post it immediately. Even though I could have taken the photo with my camera, sent it to my phone, and then posted it. I was taking the photo with my camera, but I was more so relying on my phone. And then I realized, like, I can't, or maybe I couldn't at that time had the technology to send it from my camera to my phone immediately to post it. If you look, like, I've only posted a handful of times in the last 7 years. There's only a handful of posts. But like, everything before that was shot and posted that day. Chronologically, my life just happened to be that colorful where people wanted to follow. They were like following my journeys. They were following my trips. And so many emails. I got so many emails, and I took them for granted. Like, people would reach out to me all the time. Like, man, you know what? I have a wife and kids. I have a corporate job. I can't live the life that you live, but it's a window into that. And I get a sense of freedom in one part of my day where I can escape this job that I have, or the family life that I have, to live your life for a moment of the day. So I follow along to that. Or you inspired me, like that movie or that video or whatever, the blog, or so many people have like went out of their way to tell me, you inspired me to get my first bike. You inspired me to ride. I took it for granted a lot in the early time, but it's pretty powerful to think like social media or platforms like that can really affect somebody's life, and then they're on their own path and doing big things.
Well, if you think about it, like I've said this a handful of times on my podcast, but when I turned 20, if there was some way, instead of it being those college people sitting there trying to show me these different trades and these different things I can join and go to school for, if there was like this counterculture thing, you want to be in punk rock bands, you want to skateboard and go live in a house and drive in a van across country, you want to be in some chopper shit, you want to like there's all these other paths, but unless you had access to it, you didn't know they existed.
Yeah.
But
that was the beauty of it.
It is because it would have been blown out if it was, right? But then you find it, which I found it through the years. And when Instagram opened up and guys like you could post that part of their life, I'm like, I didn't fucking know that existed.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like.
But now there's these waves. It's like music too. And the accessibility to music where there hasn't been eras of music like, well, you say like Black Sabbath and the 70s, but then the grunge movement, like that whole movement of grunge was like, it was an explosion. Like there hasn't really been a movement like that, but I like watching those old documentaries. Like I watched a documentary of L7 all chick band. I remember hearing them when I was in my teens, and it terrified me. Like I was like, there's, fuck, now I'm on the spot and remember the song, but like she's talking about saving her piss in a jar. She's all depressed. And I'm like, this is a woman singing this? I was like a teenager. But then to watch the documentary and how gnarly they were, but to watch documentaries of an earlier time before cell phones, they're in a van together. They're communicating. They're joking. They're playing jokes on one another. That's what they had to pass the time, was to communicate, to have conversation.
Yeah.
To play jokes and razz each other, and just the one-liner things that they would say just in communicating. Now, if you were to have a documentary of that time period now, they'd all be sitting there in the van doing this. It'd be silence. Like the phone has taken away that communication aspect, and that and then the ability, I guess how I got on all this was that things are more special because you're a part of that, and you only know if you're in the know. But if it goes out to the world and it's blasted out, it's all then watered down. It becomes, everything merges into that murky puddle, and it just seems, or it's a flash for a second and then it's kind of forgotten about. Nothing like really kind of. But then you do see these kids that there's two ways of thinking about it. There's kids that can use social media, internet, YouTube to learn things. Like you see these kids playing guitar and they're like virtuosos playing shit that's like unimaginable to even think about. But they're learning it through these sources of social media and YouTube. So there's the people that can take that and amplify their life.
Yeah, use it as a tool more than...
Use it as a tool. But then the majority of the people are just like dead scroll, just like their brains are turning to mush. And I find myself guilty of that too.
Same.
I'm like, why am I scrolling on this shit that I don't even care about? And it's suggested stuff that I don't even care to see. I don't know why I'm seeing it, but I keep scrolling when I could be learning something new. And if I just diverted that into, hey, why don't I type in YouTube how to do this? Or because I never had that. Building a motorcycle in my time, that was never a thing either. Like I remember calling Paul from Bare Knuckle about my neck cups and the bearings. Like, oh, I had Big Twin and they needed to fit a Sportster, and and so I'd call him up on the phone and he would talk me through stuff. This was 2007 or 8. Or Pat from Lead Sled. Like you met those people at shows, and that's how you got the information. You couldn't go on YouTube and it would just show you how to do something. You
couldn't just message them on Instagram and then be mad because they didn't respond.
Which is another thing for me. Like I'm not good at responding. I just, because once I respond, then it's like you're stuck on a phone for the entirety of your life because you're just. So
Well,
I have a lot of people that are probably not so happy with me. But
yeah,
if I
to kinda-
see them face to face,
yeah.
I'm going to give you all the love and all my time.
But that's exactly what happened with us. You know what I mean? Like, I think I was telling you when we were talking at Cook's Corner, I was like, dude, you can't, there's so many times I've walked by you somewhere and wanted to be like, Josh, dude, big fan, love the stuff. And then I didn't have anything else to kind of follow that up with.
Yeah, I would have been like, oh, thanks. And
then the end of the conversation, we'd have walked away. But, you know, and also like same thing, like there's a lot of people in this world I want a podcast, but I don't necessarily want to be like, yo, can you make an introduction? I feel like things will naturally happen if I'm patient. And this happened more natural than if I would have, you know, used anybody I knew that you would have answered a text from or a call from and be like, hey man, this guy really wants to. It's just an awkward thing, right? Because now you're doing it for him. You don't really want to do this. You don't know what this is. You know what I mean? Like
it's funny. It's a funny thing because there's people that I've met over time, and it's really either really awkward or it's really natural. And when it feels really natural, you know, those people are just going to be your friends, and it's going to. I remember meeting Kenny. I think we were on tour with that band. It was Mount Salem was the band, and we were playing Dallas. They were playing Dallas. Kenny rolls up on his chopper. He's like, hey guys, like, I'm Kenny. And it was just so easy, so natural. And if it were any other person that just rolled up and been, hey man, what's up? And they just like try to insert themselves. You're like, wait, who are you? Like, it could work. Or if it just doesn't feel, if it feels unnatural, it just like, you kind of move away from that person just naturally because it just doesn't feel natural.
Yeah, you don't understand their intentions.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
But man, I'm just using him as an example, and there's many people that I've met this way where it's just like the way he rolled up and he's like, hey guys, really good to meet you. And let me take you, there's a good spot over here that serves really good food. Let me take you over there. And he bought us all dinner, you know, and it didn't feel weird. Like he was like, it just was like, it just felt natural genuine and great. And there's those interactions you have. So yeah, like I'm always, you know, it's just, that's just the way you have to meet people. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that I love and respect, but and I know this just from being around famous people or people of notoriety or even just, you know, the way people approach me on certain things over the years. It's like you have to kind of let it happen naturally, or you can't be that person that's just like going way out of your way. You just somehow have to let it happen naturally. And
exactly.
Maybe it won't, maybe it doesn't work, but like if that person was just a regular human, well, you wouldn't have approached him anyway. You know, you didn't have a natural connection. So to force that connection is never going to work. I don't feel. That's
a good point. Yeah, if they were just an everyday person, so there is that motive or that intention. Like, oh, that's Jason Momoa. I think I should. I've always said this. Like, I think he should know me. You know, and that's kind of what's happening when you walk up to somebody with no real spill or no real genuine like. You know, if you're okay with like walking up and saying, hey man, I love the work that you do, loved you in these, is fucking awesome seeing you here. And leaving it at that so that you didn't have to like counter. Yeah. But what happens a lot, and I talk about this on the podcast, it happens to me a lot, is
they drag on. And
they they kind of want some kind of thing to come at. Like, oh man, well, thank you, man. You know what? When I did that, I was fucking... That's kind of what they want, but it's like, I don't know how to be that person, you know? Sandoval, perfect at it. Yeah. I envy his ability to really be there for the people that are stoked to see him. Yeah. A lot of the things I do is kind of behind the scenes. Like when we started podcasting, I didn't have to put my face on anything. Yeah. You know, I love a camera because you're on the other side of it. You know, I love painting. I love all these things. I love motorcycle riding.
Too. Somehow I've ended up in places where it just has naturally kind of, I've ended up on the other side or just because I was just living on the road, people were seeing my face in a more natural way. But like anybody puts a camera on me, I'm like, I get really fucking weird. I'm like, I don't know. Do I, you know, I overthink it's like, so.
If I could just make the faces I make in the bathroom looking at myself, all the time. Fuck, dude, I'd be a goddamn model, man.
Overthinking it.
Exactly.
But yeah, if anything is forced, it just is not gonna work.
So I've had a lot of people reach out on this trip, offering, trying to send gas money, which I appreciate. But I told a lot of them, like, the biggest thing is just, man, invite me. If I'm coming to your town, show me your spot.
Yeah, but I don't like, so when I traveled with Instagram, like, that was the way that people, and I posted in real time, I had to delay it by 2 days.
Oh.
So that way I was already through, because it changes your journey. Like, you're a different example because I was with a group of people.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to have one random person.
I'm kind of looking for something to change.
Yeah.
But
again, it could be the weirdest night of your life too,
Exactly.
Because people have an expectation. They want to show you this, they want to show you that, or they have, like, for me, I think was largely, maybe not largely misunderstood, but people had a idea of who I was, being that, like, if you're not in the world and you see that kind of bike and you're like a biker. I've never called myself a biker. I mean, look, I love flowers and, I haven't always been that way. I didn't have the space to have things, but, like, I was in Japan and there was a guy from Sweden. He was like, "Oh, I thought you were much louder. I thought you were a louder person." I'm like, "No, I'm just like a soft-spoken guy." I don't know. I don't like to talk about myself, really. But, like, I think people have an idea of who I am based on the life I've lived. And it's not always so accurate. I don't think, or
yeah.
At least I think that, because the way people, after they have met me, is like, "Oh, okay, you're not exactly who I thought you were," in a good way, in my opinion. I thought you were just this loud asshole.
Yeah. I've never seen you be loud, but, like, at the same time, it's when you see someone through channels, whether it's like on magazine pages or music video or that documentary, like, you are going to form an opinion because you're seeing so much of this person in a way you don't see everybody that way.
Yeah.
Same way if someone does a YouTube channel, like, "Oh, you're kind of like the same guy you are on YouTube." That's usually a compliment, depending on what you're like on your YouTube.
Yeah.
But then again, man, like, for me on podcasting, especially when I'm around my friends and we're cracking beers open, we're having a good time on a podcast, busting each other's balls, and then somebody comes in person and they start trying to pick up on that energy, and
it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, we ran into that a lot
Yeah.
in our circle. When you travel, you're with your homies. You tend to stand in a circle with your homies and just bullshit back and forth. People that see it from the outside, they might want to be a part of that or say, "Hi, hey, I love what you do," and try to get into that circle. And you're kind of like, "Okay, cool," but it just kind of feels awkward at that point. It's not like you're, like, pushing them out or you're showing, but people will turn around and be like, "Oh, that asshole," or "They're too cool."
Yeah. I've been, walking around Mama Tried this year. Like, I don't know a lot of people in this space. You know what I mean? But I do enjoy the fact that I'm able to walk around and see and be that fly on the wall more so than if I was at, Bagger Racing League. You know what I'm saying? Like, I enjoy that. I enjoy being a student. I wanted to spend this whole year trying to put myself in positions of being more taught something or learning something from someone or something, rather than continue to put myself in spaces where I feel like I need to preach. You know what I'm saying? Even though I do have a natural inclination to preach sometimes, and I'm working on that, but it's
Well, on that subject of, like, folks coming in at different times and different eras of it starting as one thing and then people thinking it's another thing and coming in really hot, and maybe because of all the aftermarket stuff, it's like, "Oh, these things are readily available now. I can just buy a chopper. And now I'm a biker," and they think the idea of what a biker is
materialism.
No, just being out at the bar acting like a fool and saying stupid shit or being really loud or just acting obnoxious. And that's not always that's not what it's about. You know, thankfully in the group of friends that I have, like we could all get pretty wild and do our fair share of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But everyone was still pretty mild mannered, and yeah, we would get a little wild, but it wasn't just like obnoxious things that we would do. But people will come in and they'll buy that. But what I always say is go to the swap meet. Like you talk about wanting to learn. Swap meets to me are the safe zone, because that's where the good people are, because for one, you have the old timers there. The old timers have seen it all. They have the knowledge. The parts are sitting out there. If you're young, you're typically there because you're willing to learn. You're willing to admit that you may not know everything. When some of these younger kids have come in, and I've seen it where they're like, they think they know, or they act like they know everything, but they bought a bike that they didn't build.
Yeah.
But you don't see those people at the swap meet because they're too afraid to let it be known that, like, oh, I don't know what that part is laying on that tarp. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to ask what that is because I don't want to be made a fool of.
It'll destroy this identity I made.
Yeah. So the people that I show up at swap meets, they're the old timers that have the knowledge, that are willing to share the knowledge. You have guys that have come in as younger people, and now they've built bikes, and now they have a plethora of stuff that they're willing to sell, and then also give their knowledge. And then the young people that come in are usually really sweet people that are like willing to learn and ask questions. And those are the people that I want to be around.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you go to the show, it's all about the show. The people come in hot, never understood revving the motor. It's just, I don't understand it. People come in all hot, revving it, making a shit ton of noise. I'd rather be the guy that rolls in really, really smooth and quiet, you know, and rolls in and is comfortable in who I am, and let it be that, you know. Swap meets that's where I would rather be over any show. Go there, hang out, you camp out for a weekend, you connect with friends, cook on a grill, drink some beers, hang out all day, talk about some parts. Now you've got a new motor that you brought home, or a part that because you bought one thing, now you're building a bike around that one thing, and now you're collecting more parts, and that passion of like saving something or building something or creating something that then you can ride and then enjoy with those same people in a different way. I think that's where it's at. That's where I enjoy being, swap meets.
I went to my first swap meet and bought a Sportster tank and a little vintage half shell helmet. So I do get the vibe there. You know, we've got a lot of guys in Texas that have been pushing to bring swap meets or keep them relevant.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to take advantage of that as well. But like I said, it's kind of hearing you say that, like, yeah, you're right. Like that's where I can go learn a lot about these motors. Like I was telling you how I don't know much about them. I don't know what to do. I understand it, but I don't really know what that does. You know what I mean? So it's like,
well, that's why when you said you're in this world and you're trying to learn from it, I can always respect someone who's willing to say that, like, hey, I want to learn, or I want to understand that more, or I'm open-minded. Really, for me, it's just being open-minded. Being an open-minded person is going to take you much farther in life, in my opinion, than just being closed off and being like, this is the way it is, and this is the way it's got to be. And even the period correct thing, it's like, yeah, that's a style, and mainly for me, it's a visual thing because of my photography. Like, I love period correct bikes because you could take a photo of them and you're like, oh, when was that taken? Was that taken in 1969? I don't know, you know. But as soon as you put a disc brake on it, like, okay, no, it's newer than 1969 because there's a disc brake on it.
Yeah.
Unless it was Dick Allen or something, you know. So, that's why I leaned on that. But like, it doesn't have to be that. And as long as you're open-minded.
As I started to kind of, you know, get into like certain, situations with this podcast and be able to meet people that I've grown to admire in a sense of like what they've done or what they do. I've kind of applied like how I felt about the scenes I've been a part of and how I've seen people come in. I don't want to be that person in this place. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to come in and be like, oh man, like I'm telling you how I'm really stoked about everything you do, but all I'm trying to get you to do is come look at what I've done. Yeah. It's like I'm trying to use flattery to get you to, see how cool I am or I think I am or whatever, So it's kind of a weird one, but
I've always been like, I always like to park my bike in the back corner. Yeah. I don't know. I don't like riding my bike in this, and then I'll get off it immediately and run away from it. I don't want to talk about bikes. Yeah. I'm here to hang out with friends and it might be a baseline of a common interest, but that's not what I want to sit and talk about. I don't care if you run in a 21 and an 18, and I don't want it. The folks that have to pull up their phone and no, it's in the they'll sit and scroll on their phone just so they can show you a photo of what they're building, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm different, but to run into that every 30 minutes,
there's a place for that conversation.
Yeah,
it's usually not at that spot.
Exactly. Yeah. I've known you for a long time. We have a common interest and we're talking through it and we're going back, but it's somebody I just met and is showing me what they're building. I get it. They're flattered. They're if they're inspired by something I've done or my bike that I built and they want to show me it. I get that they're excited and want to show me, but I'm just trying to hang out with friends and people I love and we're all there because of motorcycles, but I don't want to talk about every detail of a I'm not a nerd. I'm not a detail freak or we were talking about cameras. It's a tool. Yeah. It's a tool to create. And I've never nerded out about the technology of cameras or, I started with that Rebel 2000 film camera. Mm-hmm. I got a Rebel digital camera. And then I got the 20D and then went to 5D. And then I would burn up a camera and then I would get the next iteration of that same one. Mm-hmm. I've always used Canon. Now I'm at an R5. I just, when it's time to get a new camera, I'll peek around and see what the best option is and what my options are. But I don't, and honestly, I'll admit this, but when I was first starting out, I used program mode a lot. I didn't even know what I was doing really, other than the light, the angle of the light hitting your face right now, and my perspective that I use or the angle that I use makes the photograph. So then over time I got familiar with if I use a slow shutter speed when I'm going down the road, it's going to create a blur. Mm-hmm. Or if I use a 1.8 aperture, it's going to fall off in the background. I'm going to focus on the eyes. But program mode for a good chunk of, not a good chunk, but when I was starting out, it was program mode. I mean, maybe everyone was like that, but where it would just set the settings up for you, basically. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have admitted all that, but no, I never nerded out on but then I got familiar with it. You get more comfortable. You start, with the ability of analyzing, your work. That's the biggest thing. To be able to take a photograph, look at it and be like, oh, if I just had done this, or if I had changed the angle, or if I had used a different aperture, different shutter speed, what that would do. Mm-hmm. And then shooting from the bike, you start to know, I'm all over. I changed my settings. I
shot 3 different shutter speeds when we rode earlier. Yeah. Some I wanted to nail, we were going across the bridge. I'm putting it closer to 100. Yeah. Maybe I'll get some motion blur, but I want to make sure that I'm getting at least something. And then when we came back across the bridge, I'm like, all right, I'm going to throw it down to 60 and see what I can get. You know what I mean?
talking about being in the corporate world, and I touched on this earlier, is like sometimes you fall into having to play a safe zone because you need to know that you got the photograph. Whereas like if you were just didn't have the pressure to create so many photographs that nailed this look, you would just been like, okay, well, I'm just going to throw it at 60. And maybe you didn't get anything because they were all out of focus.
Yeah.
They're all blurred. And it didn't really matter. But like in that corporate world where, I mean, some of these shoots, they're like $1 million shoots.
Yeah.
They're spending a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a shoot. It's like you kind of, when they want to see that 60th of a second shot with the blur, you're kind of like, man, I need to nudge up just because I need to know that I got something for them to use. So your photographs tend to get into a safe zone a little bit, you know, and sometimes you have the time to explore and play around, but some of these shoots are like, there's video, the video needs to get what they need to get. The drone needs to get what they need to get. The camera car, the arm car needs to get what it needs to get. And then, you know, you're the last up and it may be the shittiest light of the day. And it's like, okay,
Twilight hour.
Well, I got one run. I got to play it safe, you know?
Yeah.
When the art director is like, no, we need it. We need blur. We need it all maxed out to the, you know? So it's kind of a weird juxtaposition there.
Yeah, I understand.
You know? When you're doing personal stuff, you can kind of just let things go and like experiment a little bit more. And but I've gotten really good at knowing if I'm going down the road, like I can slow down to a 60th.
Yeah.
But if I'm standing up and turn around backwards and want to get a shot of the front, you're not getting so much of the side motion blur. Like I need to make sure that they're sharp. So then I'll speed up.
Yeah.
To 160 or, or faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably faster than 160, but.
Yeah, that's the other like benefit, I think, like just riding with you earlier, even though we're just cruising on, the main roads and we had a little bit of that highway. When all your boys are on fucking 131 performance baggers and everything's a fucking race to the next one, it's hard to get those shots. And it's even, I mean, you easily can get that motion blur when you're doing 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But framing is hard,
Yeah.
And I don't want to shoot so wide that I have to crop in so small to get the shot I want.
Yeah.
I want to try to fill the frame with what I'm looking at. And
well, my way, I was always taught, especially in film, because it's starting in film, you don't ever shoot to crop.
Yeah.
You shoot to get your frame, so that, and also what you run into is like, I always ran into the issue where I would shoot that way. The art director, when we come back, would be like, hey, I need more room for the text. I need room for the logo. I need room for, they're like, can you just back up? Like that shot wouldn't look the same if I just backed up. The dynamics would be different. If I'm wide and I'm close and I have it framed, the bike is going to have a different dynamic look than if I backed up, everything narrows down, it doesn't have the same dynamics. Sometimes it's hard to convey that to people that like, just back up, just back up, and so that way we have more room. You can do that, but the shot may look a little different.
It does, yeah. There's one thing I've always felt like I shot for Instagram because that's where my photos would find a home. So I was always trying to fill it with like this impactful thing of like, I want you to see these wheels and I want you to see these parts. And the kind of photography I've fallen in love with through like other people of outside the motorcycle space is more, a little bit backed up, a little bigger frame, smaller motorcycle involved in it. But it tells like the story of this landscape with the bike in it that I've fallen in love with.
I was going to say that earlier. You'll be on shoots, and a lot of these shoots that I'm on, there are other photographers, and then you'll see their photographs, and you're like, oh, damn it, I'm jealous of that photo.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a ride I was just on, like where somebody had a shot where it was just a really wide shot and a little bike. Like I'm always so focused on showing the subject and the bike, where I'm always a lot of times I'm in too close.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, I should. And I've learned a lot about, because my photography in the past has always been like, you're in the moment, you're right there, you're one of them.
Yeah.
So I'm always, wherever they were, I was. I never like stepped, like you were talking about this photo here, where I did step back, but it was kind of a moment where people were having their time. And there were some other people over here too, so I wasn't just alone. But I have learned that like, I have to get in really close, get back, get my shot, get in close, but then like run up the mountain and get that shot too, just to kind of tell a story.
It's funny because so when I go piss every day at my house, we have that 6 over poster from Dice, and it's got I think the 2 images, but they're both wide shots. Might be 3 images. One's of somebody pushing their bike up, I think in LA on that bridge, and it's just a wide thing. And the other one looks like Jeremiah or something in the desert. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't never think to shoot like that. Yeah. Because of where I put my images. Yeah. But there it works. That works there. You know what I mean?
I run into that. It goes in waves.
Yeah.
Where if you're shooting for social media, like no one ever really asked for a vertical shot. And I guess unless for a magazine and you wanted the cover shot, you would set up the cover shot to be vertical. But by and large, you'd always shoot like a horizontal shot. But then when the story came in for Instagram, everything needed to be vertical. Hey, we need more verts. We need more verts. We need more verts. But that photo then is really only usable for social. Like, I don't print anything that's vertical.
Yeah, I don't see any verticals.
It's more about the landscape and shooting. But now, with the way cameras are, and I'm not guilty of this yet, but if social media needs a vertical, and there needs to be an addition to the top layer, which is usually they have some sort of text or something there anyway. Generative fill is a crazy fucking thing.
It is.
It's crazy thinking about that, and AI and where that's going. Yeah. And working in a company that's starting to delve in some commercial companies are finding ways to produce stuff. It's a scary thing because in some cases it's really good. But I think with motorcycles, the one thing, like if you talk about car manufacturers, there's no soul. There's not a human element to it. Yeah. It's a car. It's big panels reflecting light. A motorcycle has a human on it. But I also think that's the helmet takes away from the human factor. And I think what resonates with my photographs of this era is no one's wearing helmets. You can see that person, identify that person. You can see their soul. You can see the smile on their face. You can see their eyes. You can see the grit on their face and gritting their teeth through the rain. Helmets take away from that. But the thing that the motorcycle always has is the human element. And that's something I think that's what really can talk about Harley Davidson as a brand and having that long legacy of tradition and history. And, but I think it always comes back to the human element.
No, yeah, that makes sense, 100%. Yeah, the human on the bike, that's a good perspective in comparison to cars and whatnot. I'm sure AI will fucking just get better and better, but...
Well, AI, I've heard, I don't look into any of this stuff, but AI is cloning itself. So now it's going backwards.
Yeah, well, on the AI thing, I thought it was funny how I saw a meme, and this is the times when scrolling kind of works in our favor, but it was like, man, I thought when we had robots, they were going to doing all the chores, and we were going to be able to go do art, and now they're doing all the art, and we're doing all the work. Yeah, and it's just I was like, fuck.
Well, I do believe we're going to go back into a period where it's you're going to have to work with your hands in some way. But I think we need that. I feel like I'm wasting away as a human sitting and not using my body. and not using my hands. I think I gain every time I do a project or I fix something or I finish a project. There's a lot of satisfaction in that. And then there's mental health in that. Mental health in working with your hands and creating something and making something better than it was. So the next iteration of my life is like, I'll never stop using a camera, but it's going to have to be something that's with my hands. I don't know exactly what that is yet, but I had a lot more time before having the full-time job to build bikes. And I built a few bikes, but I bought and sold a lot of bikes where I'd fix bikes, change them up a little bit, and that was kind of an income to support the photography and
the lifestyle.
They kind of like lived together, So I think we're entering a really strange world that's going to be really confusing, but also like what's real and what's not anymore. Things are out there and people are like, oh, well, I saw it. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it was real.
The speculation of which path humans can take, or at least the ones that are kind of like just over certain aspects. Who would have thought that like Instagram and social media would have become what it is and changed culture the way it has, how everybody's trying to create something for this and all this, that, and the other. It's like we didn't see that shit coming. You know what I mean? No one did. And now,
like I said, I never even touched a computer early in my life and couldn't imagine ever. I grew up in cornfields. I always thought I'd be working with my hands or doing some sort of trade. Building something, working on something. So to live a life that I have. Granted, I still am like building walls and doing drywall and building bikes and working with steel. But I wish I had more time to do it. But at the same time, I don't, because I'm like living a really beautiful, colorful life of riding motorcycles and meeting beautiful people.
Well, the pad's dope. You kind of downplayed it in a sense on the phone, like, oh man, the place is a wreck. It's like I'm doing all this stuff, and I walk in like, motherfucker. Like, this place is. But
that's the thing of being an artist. Like, it's never done. It's never to your satisfaction. It always needs work. It's never finished. It could be better. So, that's the other part. It gets comfortable, and then you're like, well, I don't want to tear this apart today. You
still need your peace here. You still need to be able to check out of the world here and not want this to also be another anxiety or problem.
Well, it is like, everything. I don't know. I think I do. I've always lived with anxiety of, I always have to be doing something. I always have to be creating something, working towards something better, making my life better, always starting with something that's a pile of shit to make it something better. I just remember being young and wanting a guitar. I finally found one in the garbage and then sanded it down, repainted it. My mom worked with a guy that owned a guitar shop, and he did the electronics on it and strung it up and like set it up for me. So then I had a guitar and I learned to play it, and then I traded that guitar, and with a little bit more, I got a better guitar, and I just kept trading up. I'd fix something on that, and that's just the way my life's always been. But tendency to accumulate everything
projects.
Everything I've ever bought. It was like, oh, that's cool, but I can make it better, or I can turn it. That's broken, but I can fix it, and I would have never been able to afford it. But then you do all the math, and you're like, well, it took me 10 years to get to that project, and it cost me this much money and this much time. I might as well just bought the good one, you know?
Well, it's just the wiring. So not everybody's wired to want that or want that path. And sometimes the path of the most resistance is what creates the most value in the things you have.
Yeah.
Right. I envy a person who does not have the wanderlust of experience. Like,
why?
Exactly. People associate wanderlust so much with traveling.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, it's just the experience. Like
Yeah.
I can't, if I see you do something I've never done before and I look like I might be able to do that, I want to try it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to leave that stone unturned. And it does kind of create a lot of pathways you can go down or projects you can tackle and time you don't really have. And you're like, fuck, but I want to do that,
Yeah.
So I'm addicted to that.
I'm just always exploring in some way. I know a lot of friends that, they get together, like, let's go for a ride. They ride to the first bar and they throw their kickstands down and then they're sitting in that bar for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, yeah, can we just ride another 5 minutes up the road? I know of this spot. And they'll have lived here for years, all their life. And then we'll just go down this little road. They're like, how did you know this existed? I don't know. I got out and I rode my bike. I ride a lot and I ride alone. And I explore. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because the other side of Instagram is if you're not posting, you might as well not be doing it. Because people are like, oh, well, you like my chopper. Like that thing is never not run. And people will be like, oh, do you still have that thing or do you ride that thing? Yeah, it's my daily rider. But I don't post about it every single time I ride it. And you see people out every single time they ride, which isn't very often, they post about it. Like, I'm riding,
I had to pull the hog out today.
Yeah. But it's like, if you're not, even with my photography, I haven't posted my photography in a really long time. I'm doing it more now than I ever have.
Yeah.
But just because I'm not posting about it, most people are like, oh, he's not doing it, which is, I know that, and as a professional photographer, I should be putting it out to the world. But then it comes into that game of like, well, now I'm sucked into this app. Now I'm spending too much time on my phone. Now my thumb hurts from scrolling, and like.
Well, I've gotten to this point where I have images that I've shot that I'm in love with that I need something. I need to post today. I got to feed the algorithm, but I don't want the world to see it on social media that way. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm saving it for a book or a magazine or prints or a show, but I want to just hold on to something I created that I'm proud of and not hoard out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Give it a chance to be seen in the right way or a better way to maybe be more impactful so people will see it the way I saw it.
Yeah.
Even editing photos when you're on your computer screen, you're like, fuck, this is sick. And then you fucking edit it, export it, airdrop it, and you're like, wait.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
Where did it go? Where did the depth?
The way it looks on a screen, and then everything's on a screen now. It used to be you had to calibrate your screen for the printer.
Yeah.
So that way, every time you printed, it came out looking a certain way. And I just kind of wonder about all these different folks that are working together on the same project. None of them are sitting across from each other. They're all in different corners of the US and they're seeing it on a screen. Mm-hmm. Does that screen match their screen?
Yeah. Is he telling you he doesn't like the color grade?
Yeah.
Is he looking at it on a calibrated, Apple ProRes monitor?
Is he looking at it on their phone?
Is it an
on
Android?
A monitor, on a BenQ, on a whatever, it doesn't all line up, Well, that looks too flat. And then you look at it somewhere else like, wow, that's contrasty as fuck.
The final straw for me to go full Apple on everything was I got a chance to shoot a bike in Sturgis for a magazine for promotion. And I shot it, edited it. It was sick. Exported it to him. It was yellow.
Yeah.
The screen was so out of calibration.
Yeah.
That it, and I had no idea this was a thing. Like I edited it here and then you send it over there and then bam, it's fucking messed up. And so,
well, it's like, and then when it gets to print, I was going to pull up that Enthusiast. I have a lot of stuff in, and
is that the recent one that just came out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that one at the house.
Yeah. So I shot the cover, a lot of that stuff I shot, but then you see it in print. It doesn't always translate to print is a whole nother color space.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother difficult thing to have to adjust for or allow for. So depending on where you see it and who's seeing it and how you see it and the size you see it, and it's all different. So then it's like, what do you default to? Do you default to your iPhone? Because that's where most people are going to see it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, when I went to Michael Lichter's house, and I've said this story a lot on the podcast, when I went to his house, and similar to the way yours is, like, I see your life on your walls. Like, this is a life you've lived or you've appreciated, whether it's the heirlooms you have right here or from the trinkets of your friendships. Like, I was like, man, you know what? My house doesn't represent me. Like, the space I live in, sleep in, hang out with my wife and my kids in, it doesn't represent who I am.
Well,
so,
I'm a bachelor and I'm a bachelor dad. And,
yeah. My wife is pretty chill. She likes the culture that we're a part of. So she's allowed for me to put a big, 6-over poster in front of the pisser, right? A Japanese Easy Rider poster in the hallway.
Yeah, but is that you and your experiences? That's a poster.
Well, the thing is that, like,
I don't have that stuff.
I have a lot of great photos of myself, not myself, but my wife and certain things, but I don't want to, like, I have some badass shots of my wife that I was like, I printed it. Do you want to hang it? She's like, man, I just don't want to see myself on the wall like that. That's a weird thing, right? Because most of us grew up in a household where there was a picture of us or our family on the wall, right? And now I think the reverse narcissism that some of, like, social media has created, to where it's like, I don't really want you to come to my house and see 40 photos of myself on my wall.
Yeah, no.
It's weird, right?
No.
But that wasn't weird 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of things, like, what most people don't know is my phone here. So sometimes I'll post it'll just be a little flower, and it'll be a GPS coordinates. I'll pick little pieces of the earth, and I started taking those photos just to get the GPS coordinates to attach them to, and see, I have them in here. Like, I'll take a flower that I've found, and then they're pressed.
Oh, shit.
So it's little pieces of the earth everywhere I travel to. And if it feels like a special moment or a special place, I'll grab a little flower and I'll take a photo of it. So it's geo-tagged, and that's the GPS coordinates of that piece of earth. And I have all those saved in a little book. It could be feathers or flowers, something small. And the easy way for me to save those is to take a dollar bill, smash them in the dollar, and I just put them in the back of my phone case.
Nice.
So then I have all those, like, I have the photo of the place I was at with the geotag and the little piece of earth so I have a lot of those things in my house, or like little things that people give me over time, or like, I don't know, I have this, like, fascination with antique bells. So I have bells all over my house. So then sometimes I'll gift those. I'll engrave something in the inside.
Okay, hell yeah.
And because it's like a resonant. It's like, and some of them have different sounds and they resonate different and seem more special to me than others, or to someone else. Or so I don't know. Yeah, I've like collect little memories, and each one, it's like all that stuff up in there. It's like each thing. It's like, oh yeah, this is a lighter from when I was in Copenhagen, and we all did a bunch of mushrooms, and we ended up in this bar. It's called the Eiffel Bar, and we're all looking at each other like, why are the lights flashing? And you ask the bartender why the lights are flashing, and he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? The lights are flashing. But every one of us were like, why are the lights all flickering? But, so it's like little things that I have that are memories from the past.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we started kind of creating in our house, is trying to be more mindful of those type of things, and find, instead of like go to Target and see what the cool frames have in them, and put that on the wall, we try to have some things that either we created or from friends, or like I said, I have other photographers' prints that I bought, and those are hanging up in different spaces of the house. I got my favorite David Mann posters like framed around where I like work and edit and stuff. And then I've been fortunate to have friends to start like thinking of me whenever they see something and they'll buy it and send it to you.
Yeah.
Which I think is the raddest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I'm still getting to that point. I'm it sounds fucked up to say, but like my mind's 100 miles an hour all the time that I might see something and not even go, oh, my buddy Bruce would love that. Let me buy it. And I'm trying to, get to that mind space of being that way.
I think, but also traveling on a motorcycle, it's like I think about all the shows, all my friends that have companies that have t-shirts or all these trinket things. Like I never bought any of that stuff because all I had was my motorcycle that I needed to carry all the tools and the parts that would break. And so I just didn't ever have that mind or had the money to even purchase anything at that time.
Yeah. My buddy that I stayed with last night gave me the book from Flash. I didn't even know about it. And he's like, dude, I got 2. I'm gonna give you one. So it's in my bag right now. And this morning I was flipping through it. And then we started having conversations. And then that's like, I'll be there 11. No, it's 11:15 now. I'm like,
yeah. It's pretty unreal. That one I got from his daughter at a swap meet.
Yeah.
Probably 2007, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Because I think I saw one recently. It's like a hardback thing.
Yeah. Apparently that recent one is way more expensive, but it has more images in it.
Okay.
From what my friend was telling me, because there's a couple iterations of it. Yeah. But
that's the same era as Danny Lyons.
Yeah.
But it's a lot gnarlier. It's crazy how the difference of Danny Lyons' photographs compared to his.
I think his is from the perspective of being in it, kind of like your work on the bike. Like it's the same thing, but different. Outside looking in, inside looking out.
Charter.
Yeah, different charter too. Yeah.
But I was gonna say that's one thing I didn't like about the Bike Riders movie, the film, is the way he's portrayed. Because I know he shot that stuff from a bike. That I've always assumed that he was riding. He was in the club. He was an outlaw. In the movie, they show him as like this kind of nerdy camera guy that like didn't really fit in, and he was like doing these weird interviews. I don't think it was like that. Yeah. I think he was more one of them at the time. I mean, you could see it in the photographs. If he wasn't one of them, then those photographs wouldn't be what they are. So, to see him, there's like a flash of him on the back of a bike shooting. Like he's like the nerdy guy with a camera. Yeah. Which is something, like I said earlier, is like I never wanted to be known as a photographer. Yeah. I always tried to hide the camera. I never wanted to be known as a photographer. That's just for nerds. I always wanted to be a bike rider, a motorcyclist. And I wanted to rather be known for the way I ride a motorcycle than the way I shoot a camera, use a camera. That was my mentality when I was especially first starting. And to be on, it goes in waves with work where they'll let me integrate into a group of bikes. And it's always refreshing to get into that again. Yeah. And then, because what happens is when you ride next to someone, there's an instant connection that's more powerful than you're going to have shooting on a set and you're shooting from the back of a minivan or something. There's no connection. Yeah. You're not one of them. They don't really have the respect that you'll get as a rider. Yeah. So that's something I always fed off of and utilized as a photographer, to be one of them, to get the real moments. When you're in this commercial aspect scenario, when you're shooting detached, you're always going to be detached. They're not going to like view you as one of them. They're not going to open up in the same way. They're not going to respect you in the same way. To me, it was always about having that respect of being a rider.
I get this, and I have to assume you do from looking at the imagery. When you're riding, all I see is, maybe I'm here and I see my friend in this window of my arm in the bar in the road, and it's like, God damn, fucking Cody looks like a badass over there. I wish I could screen that. Or, like you see these images of your friends looking fucking super badass and you start capturing them. That's kind of what led me to fall into this heavier. And when I started traveling with my friends, I was like, God damn, the light's hitting that fucking bike, and the trees, how the chopped light keeps kind of flashing on the bike. It's like you get enamored with those kind of unique things that are hard to recreate stationary.
Yeah. And for me, riding long miles, if I'm thinking about images that I'm creating, those miles go by like that. And my body doesn't hurt because I'm moving around, I'm looking, I'm always kind of looking for that. Or when I am shooting, I'm moving my body around.
Yeah.
But I'm also hyper aware of what's going on the road. I ran it, and this is an example like where people would be like, wow, you're crazy. That's wild. That's insane. But then when I'm just riding and not shooting, I tend to, any time I've ever wrecked my bike, it's never been camera related. And I've wrecked the bike many times. It's always tires and rain, road conditions. But I almost ran into the back of a parked car recently because I was like, there was a train yard, and it was like a scrap yard for a train yard. It was like all the train wheels were like stacked up, and there was iron everywhere. I was like looking at it, and it was kind of through town with this weirdly parked car. And I look up, I'm like, holy shit, and go around it, But like when I'm shooting, I'm just like really hyper aware of everything in the environment. And
Same.
I just haven't ran into any issues.
Well, I mean, when we left the coffee spot, we got on one road, and I stood up to get a couple of shots, and I didn't want to get in front of you and shoot back because I don't know the roads, so I wanted to be able to still see the road and stuff.
Yeah.
I hit one of those fucking dips of where the manholes was low.
Yeah.
So I saw it coming, and I dropped the camera and grabbed both the bars and kind of got low to embrace, and I was like, fuck, please don't bend the rim. And the whole while I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay.
It's gnarly around here.
There were some spots in the corners. I was like, God damn, I could hide like a 1911 pistol in that fucking hole right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's gnarly up here. We have the freeze thaw, and like the roads just pop.
Yeah.
There was one winter, it was 50 below zero. The next day it was 50 above zero. It's a 100-degree swing in a day, and the roads just go like that.
Yeah, that's the scary part, Fortunately, like when I did that bike, I did it to where everything that's custom on there can be replaced with a factory, and it'll bolt right up. Yeah. Whether it's a front wheel, whether it's a rear fender.
That's a good way.
A lot of that stuff can't got be fucked, but
Yeah.
So, but yeah, dude, we did a good job. It was fun, man. Like, it was good to hear all these different aspects of like, the things I wanted to ask about, like the things I already knew, and then like opening up dialogue to other things I didn't really know. So it was really nice to be able to have this conversation. And, I wish I had my camera right here and not there, because the light was like, I was like, oh man, this would be a great fucking shot to throw in the interview. You know what I mean? But no, I do appreciate this, and you opening up to do this podcast and making this a very easy thing to do for me. So, they can find all your shit.
It's weird to think about sitting and talking, but then you get into it, and then all of a sudden it's like hours go by. You're like, oh, shit.
It's easy, man. Especially when it's like, it feels, like I try to only do podcasts with people that I genuinely want to talk to and ask them stuff. Yeah. I don't try to like star chase or drama chase things. Like I want to talk to that dude. It might not even be a relevant thing anymore, but if the passion's in me, it'll come out in the way I feel like I'm trying to get to know that person in their life, and hopefully it feels more genuine and less of a
absolutely
like oh, what's this dude's angle? You know what I'm saying? No. So, but no, I appreciate it.
I wouldn't have done it that way. I don't know. I feel like I've always been, if it feels disgenuine in any way, I really steer away from things like that. Yeah. If I sense it. But that's sometimes a bad thing for me, because I'm like, I don't feel like you're doing it for the right reasons, and I can't hide the fact that I don't like it.
That it comes with patience, man. Like, because there was a time, like I said earlier, where if I would have had this opportunity, or if I would have forced this opportunity, it might not been as genuine as I hope that I know it is for me now. So that's kind of something I've learned through doing podcasts is like all the things that you want, like if you truly want them, you'll naturally like start putting yourself in better positions for those things to happen without like you taking, you know, big leaps forward and skipping some of the process that you need to kind of go through to be in that special space.
Well, and I touched on like, what's my next chapter in life? And I know that from past experience, if you get out and you travel, you're going to meet people. And by meeting people, doors are going to open and like you'll find the path. Yeah. My life has always been that way to where, and I was really concerned about, I had to be this, and then I went through a situation where I just let it all go. And I was like, I just need to leave here. And I left, and one thing led to another. And I just kind of took the path of least resistance where I'm like, was working towards what I was passionate about. I didn't stray from that. I wasn't trying too hard to create an angle. I just kind of went with it, and I ended up where I needed to be. Yeah. So if something changes, I guess the best thing I could do is just kind of go out. Because if you sit in one spot, doors aren't going to open. Yeah. You got to go out and just be open-minded, just be present, don't force anything, and let it happen.
Yeah, going out and being present, whether it's, you know, I say this to brands or builders and people get in the space, is like, man, you can post all the social media you want, but until you go to Born Free and Sturgis and these things and shake people's hands and let them see your stuff in person, that's where opportunities come. Yeah. Social media is kind of like the lube, if you will. Yeah. It might grease the gears a little bit, but real relationships are face to face. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, once people see your face more and more and more, you become familiar, and then certain things will open up simply because you don't seem like a stranger anymore. Yeah. And also there's this aspect that you're putting in a little bit of time and work to, you know, deserve whatever it is you're trying to get into, you know?
Yeah, or you're just genuine and you're showing up and you're being a part of it rather than just being a keyboard jockey.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Josh. Yeah. We'll end on that one.